Hello, hi, my name is Queen Morgana, and welcome to the first installment of my Sims 4 occult lore. Now, this isn't a lore video about the occults that come with the Sims and the stories that are kind of scattered about with them. Instead, this is more of a video about how I play with all of my occults and the lore I came up for them, just to make things more interesting for me. Especially because I pretty much play mostly with occults for the most part, so I find it to be a lot more fun to make lore to play with them and use a bunch of mods and just make it fun, right? So I have a Sims 4 occult. Nope. Well, I do have an occult baby challenge as well as an ultimate decades challenge. And well, a lot of people have been interested in the things I've been saying because it's mostly been in my head. So here is my video on aliens specifically this time around and how I play with my aliens. Now, first and foremost, I am a big mods user, but you can 100% just use your head. Back in the day before I had a big computer that could handle all of the mods, I just used my imagination, which is totally okay. But if you do have a computer that can handle some or all of the mods if you choose, then this might also be a really fun thing for you. So first off, I have general mods, which are mods I use just in my game in general, but specifically that aid towards occults. All of these mods will be listed down below and linked, of course. So the first of my general mods that I use is MC Command Center, which is just a mod in general, but I specifically use this for the larger club options, which will come in handy later because I have big groups of occults. But you can also use the mod to handle your occults however many other ways you want. You can make your occults infertile. You can, keep them stuck in a specific world. You can do all types of things with MC Command Center regarding your occults. So just keep that in mind. I specifically use it for the larger club options when it comes down to occults. Next up is the Hybrid, Unlocker, and Stabilizer, which is made by the 12th Doctor 1. I use this mod to, of course, make hybrids, and I love it. I don't think, I mean, I could play with mods on its own, but ever since I found this and started using it a few years ago, it has been like a go-to staple in my game. It makes having hybrid children so much easier. Not hybrid children per se, but hybrid sims in general. One of my favorite go-tos is I like to make sea witches, for example, using a hybrid between mermaids and spellcasters. Or in the case of this video, I like to make magical aliens. So they'll have alien powers with alien forms, but also magic. And because the unlocker also works in live mode, when my sims have children, like if an alien sim has a child with a spellcaster sim, that child has a really high chance of coming out as a hybrid naturally using this mod. So it's just always so fun. It kind of keeps me on my toes about what genetics and powers and abilities my sims will have, because I do play pretty big family trees. So it's always nice to see which occult or non-occult that my sims will take after more, and just helps with storytelling purposes as well. Next up, we have Rambunctious Religions, which isn't necessary, but I like it because religion does kind of play a nice little role. Not a big role, but it helps for historical accuracy. Well, not accuracy. It helps with my my history, the lore, and my occult history. There we go. Next up, we have occult toddler quirk. So it has always irked me that the children and toddlers and infants, now that they've come into play, do not have any type of occult, I guess, traits or actions, I should say. In The Sims 3, I vividly remember that toddler occults would, play with their imaginary sims in a different way. Like the occult toddler vampire, for example, would bite the side of the imaginary friend's neck, or werewolf toddlers are more prone to like biting and stuff like that. But The Sims 4 doesn't have any of that. Like, no occult traits really come into play until they hit their teenage years, for the most part. But the occult toddler quirks at the very least allows my toddlers to have little sentiments and moments that reflect what occult they are. I just think it adds a bit more realism, right? You might get a lot more if you're raising a werewolf toddler or a vampire toddler, or maybe as the magic is settling within your spellcaster toddler, they might be making something float or accidentally cause a storm or something like that. So I just think that it adds a lot more realism and a lot more fun to the occult toddlers. I recently started using it and I love it. I wish I knew about it before, but if you want a bit more fun, especially if you're the type of person who doesn't find the infant through children stage very engaging, especially if you're playing with occults, because you're of course waiting for the fun occult stuff to happen in their teen years, this is a fun little way to add some little quirks. Next up is the Occult Preferences mod. This one is really fun because it allows every sim to have a preference, which is the like and dislike system that comes with the game, about whether or not they like and dislike certain occults. I believe it's manual. I don't think it's random. I think you have to do it yourself, but even still, doing it yourself, it adds a really interesting layer of realism to the game because, well, we already know that the sims kind of either react in like fear or maybe get dazed when they find out that somebody is an occult, but they don't really, it doesn't really mean anything, like it has no lasting impact. But with this one, it will leave a lasting impact because they'll, you know, some of them might not even believe in occults to begin with, and then they find out occults exist. So then, you know, finding out occults exist and then realizing you hate vampires, it could just really do a lot for the social interactions between the sims, especially when it comes to occults, and kind of keeps me on my toes when I'm playing, you know, an occult sim with human friends and how they, you know, may or may not react, you know. It's very fun. Next up is the Bloodline Control mod. I use this mod specifically for really my vampires and my fairies, though I do plan on using it more for my werewolves as well and my mermaids. But basically with this mod, it allows you to have bloodlines similar to that of spellcasters. The spellcasters that come with Realm of Magic have the option to have ancient, weak, or strong bloodlines, depending on how many generations of spellcasters your sims come from. And it gives them kind of, you know, more perks, allows them to be a bit stronger than an average spellcaster. And I really like that idea. So you can use this mod for every single mod, for every single occult if you decide to. I specifically only use it for my vampires and werewolves, but I am most likely going to add it in for my fairies and mermaids as well. I just haven't really played around with them as much in a while because of the other challenges I've been playing on the game. But it makes it really fun and has another layer of social impact, or at least power impact when it comes to duels and things like that, because then we'll have pure bloods, ancient bloodlines, and things like that, which I think would make it really, really fun, especially because of course every single sim can have a child with a human who may or may not take after the occult parent. But then considering I also have the hybrid mod, it adds in a lot of fun a lot of fun tidbits about you know, maybe coming from an ancient spellcaster bloodline, then having like a weak fairy bloodline, make something interesting happen with their abilities or their ability to, you know, duel and things like that. So it's very fun. If you like the way that the spellcaster bloodlines operate naturally, then you will really like the Bloodlines mod. Next up is the Supernatural Traits mod. This mod is by the Pancake One. I use the rewards version. It just adds in a lot of, I guess, good and evil supernatural traits that you can give to any sim, even if they're human. So if you want to make a sim that's human, quote unquote, but you don't want them to be an actual occult, but you want them to be something different, you can very much do that. You have so many types of options: spiritual, angelic, cursed, tormented. Like there's so many things to work with. I've been using it a lot in my Ultimate Decades challenge. If you watch that video, you'll know how I use it. It can be used perfectly in any type of storytelling, or if you have an occult world, but you don't want to make every single sim, you know, go through the actual occult process and working with a dark form or alternate form or anything like that. Simply giving them this really cheap reward trait. It's like 30 wish points, which could be easily cheated, honestly. And giving them one of these traits could technically make them occult-like, which I really like. So I really love this supernatural traits mod. You can also have the create a sim version. I use the rewards version because it's set for randomization, and I don't like when my NPCs are randomized with certain supernatural traits because it's a bit too much. But it's perfect for reward traits. But if you like a little bit of chaos, it's also great for chaos. Last but not least is a secret occults mod, which I kind of talked about in occult preferences. I think that the two of them go really hand in hand. The secret occults mod is the one that actually goes into the whole believe in a cult, don't believe in a cult, am an occult type of thing. And then the human, I guess, reaction to seeing occults for the first time. So that mixed with occult preferences can really kind of make some shake if you're playing with occults living amongst humans, and you know, either in a modern save or in an elder save, and that could really shake up your storyline as well, because every single sim will react differently to finding out that your sim is an occult, and depending on their preference, if they have any preferences, it can go kind of bad or it can go very well. So just keep that in mind. Now, I will say I actually don't play with any specific mods for aliens. I feel like my hybrid mod does most of what I want my aliens to do. There are quite a few, not quite a few, honestly. They're aliens, because they're so underworked, don't even really have too many mods out there. But there are a few mods. If you just Google Sims 4 alien mods, you'll find quite a few of them. But honestly, these general mods, especially the hybrid one, as I said before, I mostly play with alien spellcaster hybrids more than just straight up aliens, so I have a great time with my aliens. Though if you don't want to use the hybrid unlocker to make hybrids for all of your occults, the same creator also has a magic bloodlines for aliens mod. So if you want aliens to have magical bloodlines without specifically using the hybrid unlocker and stabilizer, that mod by the same creator, I guess I'll tag that for anybody I'll link it below for anybody that's interested, but that's probably going to be what you're looking for. Most aliens hail from Sixum, the closest planet to Earth. Sixum, unfortunately, was almost always at some sort of war. It's as large as Earth and has just as many cultures with various caste systems, civil wars, dwindling resources, and plenty of other issues that slowly kind of decimated the planet over time. Their overabundance of resources, the constant war, it's led to Sixum being a dark place to live. So, aliens that were able to escape to Earth. In the early years, in ancient times for us, they were referred to as celestials by the humans of that time, as they were spotted coming down from the sky in a bright beam of light. These aliens, unbeknownst to them, were just finding a way to start fresh, perhaps to study a new planet, or maybe make a name for themselves and become able to rise to the elite class in Sixum. Either way, humans saw these aliens come from the sky, the celestials, and worship them as gods, and analyzation abilities, as well as the ability to completely erase the minds of humans and transform simple metals into precious jewels and gems, had humans worship them so thoroughly. They believed them to be gods that would help their societies and civilizations rise to prosperity, and some of them did. They were able to take tiny little metals and turn them into precious jewels that could be traded and sold for more money and at a quicker pace than any human could mine. Over time, the religion, the worship of the Watcher, grew in popularity, and humans began to turn on the aliens, accusing them of using demonic powers to mess with their minds and assuming their human forms to be stolen human bodies and replications of emotions and empathy to eradicate humanity. They were deemed dangerous, causing many to completely hide their alien forms and live totally as humans. Many aliens hid amongst the humans and never went back into their alien forms, even in the comfort of their own homes. As more aliens came to Earth, they assimilated the same way. They hid their alien forms, sometimes even from their own spouses, and prayed that their children did not share the skin that they hid. They lived completely as human, eating their foods, worshiping their gods, living their lives, and struggling with their struggles. By the medieval period, many aliens had just about completely forgot their alien side. Those traits were long ago lost, and ones that still had an alien form hid it young in their toddlerhood, forgetting what it even looked like. Over time, a large criminal network began to appear of aliens who decided to use their abilities to make life a bit easier for themselves. They created a large criminal network, its name currently unknown, though they are believed to be heavily involved in Earth's greatest mysteries, mostly assassinations, potential body replacements, and as spies. When they were caught, they simply changed their human form and went back again. To this day, nobody is sure if this criminal network even existed to begin with, or if they still do exist, but it is a conspiracy theory, a very popular one, that a lot of the celebrities and rulers of the world might not be human, and in fact, aliens in disguise. Aliens typically stayed out of the drama with other occults, mostly crossing paths with spellcasters who also lived as human passing during the era where they were hunted as witches. They got along great and created a race of spellcaster alien hybrids. As time moved on and other occults began to become accepted into human society, aliens were actually one of the last occults to even be accepted due to the fear that humans had of them stealing their bodies and replacing them. They could change their human form at will, and nobody would ever be the wiser. If their traits were taken and their empathy replicated, who would know if it's an actual alien, if they have emotions of their own, or if it's just a being pretending to be human. By the modern period, most proudly go about their day-to-day life in their alien forms, but many of them still choose to hide their forms from the outside and only show them in the safety of loved ones at home or with friends. As far as they got though, half aliens do have a difficult time fitting in with full aliens due to their lack of empathy and mind-reading abilities. Now, I play my aliens with a few unofficial rules, I should say. They aren't really, ride or die type of rules for the most part, but it's just little tidbits to make things a bit more fun for me and can change depending on the time period. For example, my Ultimate Decades Challenge, I am still in medieval time period. So my aliens, they have a lot more to lose because it is the 13 and 1400s if they are caught in their alien forms or any other social things that may happen than any aliens in my Occult Baby Challenge, which takes place in modern day where aliens and other occults are pretty fully accepted in society. And involves my Rambunctious Religions mod actually. So Sixenborn aliens are typically the science-minded non-believers. Sixem has no official religion. There are a few sects here and there that believe in higher powers, but because they are so empathetic and communicate using telepathy and their empathy abilities and everything like that, they've never really had a reason, I guess, to believe in gods or anything like that. They believe that most, if not all of their issues could be solved by really scientific advancements. So most of them are actually part of the congregation of non-believers if you decide to use Rambunctious Religions. And those are the ones that were born on Sixem. The ones who were born and raised on Earth for generations and generations are typically part of the Treaders of the Occult, which is the religion that comes with that mod that is very occult centered and occult accepting. Many of my aliens only reveal their alien forms around people they are already close friends with. If it is an era where it is safe for them to do so, or, you know, of course, if they are married to another alien or anything like that. So I would typically only have them get out of alien form when they're in the safety of their home and not out in public or not at an alien night at a bar. But again, that is pretty determined by the time period and what type of storyline I'm going for anyways. If I'm playing with an older save, half aliens are typically being accused of being changelings or witches. Half aliens could be anyone who is half alien and half spellcaster, or half alien and half human. As long as they are not able to go into an alien form, even if their human form or their one form looks inhuman, the chances of a human at the time accusing them of just being switched out with a changeling or just like a witch who was cursed to look like that after making a pact with the demon is pretty high. So it's very dangerous to be a half alien or an alien who is unable to hide their traits. Alien criminals typically only commit their crimes in alien form because while they're running away, they can switch to their human form and whoever's chasing them most likely won't know. If they're caught as human and escape, they'll just change their human form because their human form could look like whatever they want it to, but they typically do it in their alien forms and hide anything that might be discernible. But it's difficult to catch an alien who is also a criminal on Earth. Perhaps maybe with modern technology in a modern time period it'd be far easier, but in my older gameplays, before like DNA testing or anything like that comes up, it's nearly impossible to catch a criminal who's an alien unless or at least to track them down, I should say. If you catch them, you got them, I guess, but if you're trying to track them down, good luck, because you don't know what they really look like. Aliens do not have an official government or group structure while on Earth. They typically just stick to their family units. They don't have any type of council or anything like that. But Sixum is mostly monarchical. Each region, section, whatever, has its own tiny little monarchy government situation going on. And last but not least, my aliens don't have any strict gender expectations. That is a very human thing. So my aliens hailing from Sixum, regardless of what gender they may or may not identify as, it might not be reflected in the way we think of, you know, masculinity or femininity here on Earth. But the ones from Earth might be a bit more typical in that expression. On to the actual fairy mods that I use. Specifically, the first one isn't one that I use, but it is one that I do highly recommend, and it is a lot of fun to play with. It just doesn't match my specific lore, but I cannot recommend this mod enough. This is the Luck, Death, and Flowers mod. Now this mod allows a ton of new abilities for your fairies, and it goes really well with the abilities that come in game and adds a few new things. But it's very focused on fairies, or if you're playing them as fae, I guess that also really works, and their connection with life, death, and all those other things, right? So you can ascend someone to death, for example. If you have a fairy who has the age up ability, you can invoke the scent of a death flower to end somebody. You can reincarnate ghosts, I'm pretty sure. You have the ability to grant a sim who might not be able to impregnate the ability to impregnate, which is really fun. And opposite, give a sim who does not have the ability to become pregnant the ability to become pregnant. You can revoke someone's ability to try for a baby. You can have the fairy transform someone into a different occult, like a dormant, or just a straight up occult like a witch, dormant wolf, actual wolf, mermaid, all that. I think there's increased emotion buffs. Like there's so much you can do. There's some elixir abilities as well. I think you have to have like the crafting, something like that. There's so much you can do. It does require a lot of the packs to work correctly, especially if you're doing something like crafting or turning someone into other occults. But it is a really fun and interesting mod to play with, especially if you're playing. I think this fits if you're playing as I guess not a typical fairy like with the cute little wings and all that, but more of like a fae, like a fae from those stories you hear about, just kind of making deals and granting wishes and taking lifespans or something like that. Like I think if you don't want to play as a witch but maybe something more magical, giving a fairy sim the no wings option and then using this mod is perfect. I can't recommend it enough. Now onto the mod I do use personally more. Again, both are fantastic. They can both be played together. I personally use the Fairies versus Witches mod, and this mod is near and dear to my heart because I've been playing with Fairies versus Witches mod since before Enchanted by Nature came out. By the time this video comes out, Enchanted by Nature and the introduction of fairies officially into The Sims 4 is not even a year old yet. So, you know, those of us who are playing with fairies were doing so using the Fairies versus Witches mod, and boy does it include so much. I'll go over the witches section in my Spellcaster video, which will be coming up after this, but for the sake of this video, the Fairies versus Witches mod, even though it is a mod that existed, that's the word I'm looking for, existed long before Enchanted by Nature came out, it intertwines perfectly with Enchanted by Nature and has inspired me to rewrite my lore, because my fairy lore includes both Sims 4 aspects as well as Spinning Plum Bobs, who is the creator of Fairies vs. Witches. And if you've seen my Mermaids video, this is also the creator of the expanded Mermaids mod that I also talk about in my Mermaids video. But this mod is probably one of the only ways you can play with fairies without having the Enchanted by Nature's mod. Every other occult in this series or in the game, you can really only play with if you have that pack. But Fairies versus Witches, you do not necessarily need Enchanted by Nature to play as a fairy, because like I said, this existed way before it. Now there's tons of animations, tons of extra wings. There's like workable wings, like wings that actually flap and you can fly and things like that. But going through, this introduces a distinction between the Innisgreen or the Evergreen fairies, which are the fairies that come with Enchanted by Nature, versus the Sylvan Glade fairies. This mod has its fairies come from, or dwell in, I should say, Sylvan Glade, which is, if it's been too long, back when people cared about the hidden hideaways in The Sims 4, it's that one in Willow Creek where you can like mess around with the tree and go to like this really pink hidden glade somewhere. But you have the ability to have alignment, like good or evil alignment. Like your Sims actions really do matter, and it will impact a little bit of their magic as well. There's an alchemy skill that can be used by both your fairies and your witches. And it introduces something called power sources. So unlike regular fairies that come with Enchanted by Nature, where the power source is just whatever that skill tree is, or like drawing from Mother Nature, whatever the case may be, you have the option to have your fairies draw from a different power source, which will also fill their emotional need, and again, works extremely well for storytelling purposes. There's 23 power sources to choose from. I have the list up right here, so I'll just like list a few. Of course, we have like, there's air, chaos, crystals, darkness, death, music, nature. Like if you were a Winx Club girl, you can, if you were a Winx Club girl like me, you can have the whole Winx Club and more. There's a technology fairy. We got Techna up in here, illusions, metal, the moon. Like there's so many different power sources and different types of fairies you can make. And it also introduces a lot of different spells. And like Fae magic, I guess I should call it, for the fairies, and a few more, a few extra aspirations for fairies as well. And basically it has its own separate lore as well. So if you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to write their own lore, but you want a bit more than what Enchanted by Nature offers, this one does have a bit more in-depth lore. There's a giving fairy, you can call it a god, whatever you want to do. My phone would go off while I'm doing this video. There's a fairy ring. You have the ability to turn child sims into playable fairies. I'm not kidding. Same thing with the same way with the Mermaids pack from that video, where you could turn a child sim into a mermaid. You can have playable child fairies, which I adore. I love playing with the child fairies and with this mod. They're so fun. And of course, you know, when I get to the witch part, I'll talk about the child witches as well. But it is revamped the Sylvan Glade, and it's just so much fun. If you want extra wings as well, the wings that they use for their mod, which goes actually into the animated wings mod, which is optional. You don't have to have it to play with this game, to play with this mod, but their wings are fantastic as well. But yeah, I highly recommend giving that mod, both of the mods, a playthrough because they're so fun. Again, they're fantastic played together. It really depends on what you want to do. I just feel that for the Death, Luck, and Flowers mod, I feel like I get the sum, I guess, of the death aspect from the Fairies versus Witches mod. But if I just wanted to do like a very specific type of fairy, Death, Luck, and Flowers also works again, it depends on what you want to do. You can have both, you can have one, you can have neither. They're both fantastic in my opinion, and honestly work better together than pit against each other. Next up, again, is another optional mod. It introduces an occult, not introduces, but it's more centered around an occult that I feel is not deserves its own separate video, but I will talk about separately, most likely in a mega video, which will come out a few days after this video is out. But that is the expanded Plantsims mod. Now, if you play, again, Enchanted by Nature, and again, this Plantsim mod was out a little bit after the Plantsim was, you know, disappointingly introduced in The Sims 4 all those years ago. But in The Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature, you see that the Plantsims walk amongst the fairies. They all live in Innisgreen. It's all happy. It's all dandy. Fairies versus Witches mod did it first. I'm sorry. But the expanded Plantsim mod, again, allows you to have playable Plantsims. I'm just going to talk about it really quickly. It doesn't really have anything to do with my fairy lore, but you get to have playable Plantsims, and they are actually fun to play with. Like, no one plays with Plantsims because they're like terrible. The game did them terribly. You can't even really give them cute makeovers or change their hair. But with the expanded Plantsim mod, you can, and you can make them different types of Plantsims and everything. So if you want your Plantsims to be played alongside your fairies, or you just want Plantsims in general, again, I will go over this a bit more in depth in another video. The expanded Plantsim mod, also by the same creator, works very well with their Fairies and Witches mod. And last but not least, my very favorite mod, the first mod I downloaded when I downloaded the Enchanted by Nature pack, is the No More Ailments mod. This is a life-saving mod for me. Ailments was one of the most annoying things that came out of the Enchanted by Nature pack. I hear that it has been toned down in like a few updates since then, but it was still a bit too much for me personally, so I downloaded the No More Ailments mod. Now, this mod doesn't completely remove ailments all the way if you don't, well, I mean, it can if you wanted to, but it has multiple different versions. I specifically play with the version where humans or people can only get an ailment, not from being unbalanced or unlucky or anything like that, but it specifically has to be given by a fairy. I mean, you can go to a nature path or use your apothecary skill to cure it, but you're not going to get it randomly. It's not going to spread. It can only be given by a fairy. And there's multiple different versions that this creator has made. There's a version where someone can get it via the imbalance system, but maybe it won't spread. Like it'll be personal instead of an illness, right? But it was one of the more annoying aspects of Enchanted by Nature, especially since I'm playing a historical challenge, and the illnesses and everything, it was too much. It was getting to be too much. And I've actually included that into my lore, so it fit perfectly. Fairies, also known as Fae, are believed to be one of the first creatures created by the goddess Mother Nature. She blessed them with a connection to the earth so that they would feel her love and be able to feast and live happy. They originate from the Sylvan Glade, where Mother Nature resides. There, they had no worries. Food was abundant, their goddess watched happily upon them, and they frolicked and lived happily. The few times they had to walk amongst humans, they typically hid their wings and kept to themselves. The only aspect of them that revealed their inhuman nature were their sharp ears. In olden times, they were revered as excellent doctors, naturopaths, and healers that humans could rely on. They taught early humans how to use nature as medicine and how to garden. They aided them with their farmlands, tended to their animals, and lived in peace. Many of them coupled with the humans and created a race of mostly non-magical beings called elves, who were mostly just humans, but with sharp ears, somewhat better immune systems, and potentially longer lifespans. Of course, there were some mischievous dark fairies who would lure away humans, steal babies, and cause chaos. Eventually, humans split from their reverence of Mother Nature and their friendship with the fairies. They turned to the Watcher, a new god who told humans that they were superior to the Occults, including the very fairies who aided and lived alongside them for generations. As the worship of the Watcher grew, so did human disdain for fairies. Humans feared that the fairies would steal their emotions and their autonomy. Eventually, it led to a war against the fairies and the Fae. These humans were aided by witches in the hunt for fairies. These fairies used them in their potions and forced some into impure states, known as familiars. Humans and spellcasters that wanted peace with the fairies started the cult of the cow plant, hoping to get back into the good graces of Mother Nature. Eventually, the Sylvan Glade became too unsafe to live as certain humans, alongside the aid of the witches, were able to access it through a magical tree hidden in Widow Creek. The Fae split, some hiding amongst humans in a magical forest called Innisgreen, mostly working as farmers, apothecarians, and doctors. They stayed in Everdew, which later became the fairy epicenter of the town of Innisgreen. The rest of the Fae resided alongside werewolf packs, aiding them during bouts of fury, and staying near oceans, residing by mermaids. Of course, many still remained in the glade, staying by Mother Nature even as their peaceful glade was soaked in blood. Fairies in general struggled to get along with vampires and spellcasters due to their use of dark and unnatural magic. Well, besides the mischievous and dark fairies. And of course, the vampires who found Fae blood to be a delicacy. Now, Fae still mostly remain to themselves. They frolic and live happily in the town of Innisgreen, or still remain hidden deep in what's left of the Sylvan Glade. They opened up parts of their growing town to certain humans or certain elves, but still remain cautious of those who were once against them. Now, of course, I do have rules I play with my fairies, just to give myself a bit more of a challenge and make things more fun. The first one is mostly for my modern day fairies. Fairies don't necessarily have to hide in safe areas. If you're playing, or if I'm playing a time period, like a medieval time period or any time period where fairies are still in danger of being hunted, killed, or harmed by literally anybody that's not a werewolf or a mermaid, they typically hid in the glade or in Innisgreen. They didn't really go anywhere else. You might see them tiptoe around Henford and Bagley, but barely, you know? They'll visit Sulani because they're in good with the mermaids, and then You might see a couple of them traveling with werewolf packs and feeding off of their negative energy, aka their fury, so that the werewolves could think without being on a blind rampage, right? So it was very, very beneficial. But I mostly enforce those rules during times of danger. If I'm playing modern day save or a save where that's just not important, then my fairies can live wherever they want. Honestly, they're not stuck in Innisgreen, but they do feel the most connected in places with high amounts of nature. So they won't like starve to death or die in a place like San Myshuno or something like that. But I guess this is where the mod comes in if you're choosing what type of fairy they are. I feel like a technology fairy would actually thrive in the eco-living world or San Myshuno or something like that. So, you know, that can be played around with and where the fairies do go afterwards, but I'm not as strict with where they go in modern times or safe periods of time as I am with some of my other occults. Now, there is a cultural difference between Sylvan Fae and Innisgreen fairies. So typically when I'm saying fairies, even though they both have wings and are very pretty and they're flying around, I mostly am referring to the fairies as in the ones that come with the pack and reside in Innisgreen. And when I say Fae, I'm typically talking about the ones that come from the Sylvan Glade and, you know, are included with the mod. But both of them have a strong connection with Mother Nature. It's just in different ways, though I will say I typically treat the Sylvan Fae as being stronger because they might have a closer connection with Mother Nature, perhaps because they spend their time directly under the watchful eye of the goddess of nature in the glade, as opposed to being technically out in the human realm via Innisgreen, even though Innisgreen is like a halfway point to the Sylvan Glade. It's very magical, but still. Now, if you're using the mod and making a child fairy, then it is up to the parent or another trusted adult to teach them how to fly and the basics of using magic. Without that guidance, fairy children or fae children are more likely to become mischievous or potentially evil. It is very taboo for a fairy to be raised by a witch or a vampire. Not impossible, especially with modern day. Again, modern day is treated very differently, but you know, other occults, especially those who know the history of what witches were doing with fairies or what vampires were doing to fairies, they will consider it very taboo, and it might raise some suspicion or perhaps some alarm. To put into perspective, again, like I said in my backstory, like the actual lore, witches were tearing off, like forcing fairies into a super condensed state of just pure magic, I suppose. So if you're playing Realm of Magic, you know that they have familiars, and one of the familiars is called Orb of the Fairy, and it's just a floating circle with wings, unless you have that mod to make it look more realistic, in which case it looks like a terrifying, weird ass looking fairy, right? So I say that those fairies that are familiars were once fae that were just kind of ripped apart and remolded into a state that could be controlled and you know, put into a cute little orb. So when a witch adopts a fairy, people just automatically assume that this witch is going to hurt the fairy, like hurt the fairy child. And as for vampires, if I guess you've seen the vampire lore video before this, the vampires find fairy blood and the magic that runs through fae to be very addicting. So vampires really like to get their hands on fairies, and they're rarely able to, so they're worried that if a vampire is adopting a fairy, that fairy, it might just be being raised to be like a little treat, right? It's not impossible, again, especially in modern day, but boy does it raise some red flags in quite a few people. Now, again, going back to that witch thing, if a fairy or a fae comes across a fairy familiar, as in there's a witch walking about and they have the familiar and it's the orb of the fairy, they will immediately become enemies with that spellcaster. Like, it doesn't matter if that's the first, second, or third familiar. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, like, they don't care. If they see you and they see that you own one in your home, even if it's not like linked to you, but certainly if you're walking around with your fairy familiar, or they find out about it or whatever the case may be, they're automatically enemies. There is no, I just go ahead and cheat it all the way down. That is such a big act of betrayal for fairies to see someone walking around with essentially a broken soul. So it's important around these parts. Or even if you want to say that the orb of the fairy is a pixie, fairies are still pretty protective of the pixies and the sprites. In fact, with the mod, the Enchanted by Nature mod, there are pixies. And if you have a human sim or a game-made fairy, aka an Innis Green fairy, and you want to become a Sylvan Fae, you don't talk directly to Mother Nature. You talk to the sprites. You talk to the pixies. The pixies are the one that grants your sim the ability to become a Fae, and they could deny your sim. So I feel like Fae culture and fairy culture would take pixies and little baby fairies, whatever you want to say it is, they take that shit extremely seriously, because the magic isn't just like magic with wings, it's their soul. Remember, they believe themselves to be a direct creation of Mother Nature, who has created life itself, aka nature. They see themselves and the magic and plants and animals and all that as physical embodiments of nature itself, and taking away someone's free will, aka forcing them into, like, breaking them down, killing them, and forcing their soul, their magic, into a state of essentially slavery and servitude, even if they don't have memories or anything like that. It's that serious. So they are not playing if they come across a witch who has a familiar of a fairy. The other familiars, they might get some side eyes for, or maybe they'll think they're cute, like the frog one or something like that, but don't let them see that fairy, bro. It is that serious. Now, if you're using the expanded Plantsims mod, the Plantsim and satyrs, is that satyrs? The little goat guys, I don't know how to pronounce it. They are a cousin race to fairies, by which I mean that they're both created by Mother Nature as well, just different extensions of what she wanted. So, and all of those races, Plantsims, nature, Plantsims, Fae, fairies, and satyrs, all of them, they are all Mother Nature's children. They all typically get along. The only time they won't really get along, and I'll go over this more when I get to the Plantsim section of a different video, but there are some Plantsims that are not under the control of Mother Nature, but under control of the Mother Flower, yes, from the Strangerville pack. So I'll go over that. And like I said before, most fairies and fae fall under the cult of the cow plant or treaders of the occult. So typically treaders of the occult, because they all pretty much worship Mother Nature. But like I said, humans and some fairies founded the cult of the cow plant to get back into Mother Nature's good graces. And some fairies kind of fell for it as well. I think it depends on the type of fairy they are, or potentially where or how they were raised, and especially if they're somewhat disconnected from Sylvan or Innis Green roots. Now, unlike my vampires, fairies are monarchal and they have a council. Basically, they have a king and a queen, and that king and queen appoint a small council of about like 5 sims. It's not big, it's just a few trusted individuals. And this is what all fairies answer to, including like the Fae and the Innis Green fairies. Well, this mostly goes for the Innis Green fairies. The Sylvan Fae go directly to Mother Goddess or ask the giving fairy, or like the pixies or something. Like, they take it straight to the top. The monarchs are mostly for the Everdew fairies, which is actually what they're called. I've been calling them Innis Green so that y'all know what I'm talking about. When I say ever do fairies, I'm talking about the fairies that come with the pack. But the ever do fairies are the ones who have a monarch and a council. And again, I know that that pack has a Mother Nature. I ignore her, I'm not gonna lie. I don't. That is not the Mother Nature I play with. You can if you want to. Again, you can do whatever you want. That's just how I play with them. Mother Nature, if she's going to take a physical form, it is going to be in the Sylvan Glade. She is not really going to make a form for the human realm. It's just going to be for the Glade or any other hidden areas or something like that. But she won't make herself visible like that. First off, before I get to what I mean by monarch, I mean that there is not necessarily a king or a queen, but there is a monarch, a monarchal spouse, and their offspring / heirs and all that. And then they'll have a council. Each new monarch can appoint their own council, but they typically leave at least 2 elders from the previous generation before they mix in their others. Now, the reason I'm saying monarchs and not like king or queen or anything like that is because fairies don't have gender. I mean, you can make them female, you can make them male, they can go by whatever pronouns they want. They can have whatever sexuality you want, but it's not set in stone. It'll just be more like a personal preference, but it's not cultural to follow gender norms or sexuality norms. So a monarch could definitely just be like two gay guys who are the monarchs and their adopted son. Like it's really that simple. Or maybe they used magic if you're using that other mod to make a son. Or maybe they wished the sprites, not the sprites, the pixies in the mod operate the same way the wishing well does. So my fairies don't use the wishing well to make their wishes. They use the pixies or the sprites in the Sylvan Glade. And they operate the same way as the wishing well. You can wish for like children, money, love, a spouse, all that. I think it even includes a few extra wishes that the wishing well doesn't have. So there's that. Also, random context, this is not purely fairy related, but the wishing well isn't a god or anything like that. It's basically how people pray to their gods and see if their prayers are answered, essentially. Back to the fairies. Yes, gender does not exist. They may express whatever they want to be, however they perceive themselves to be. They want to be feminine, masculine, cis, trans, non-binary, whatever. Like, they don't really blink at it. It doesn't really matter. They might have a preference, I suppose, if you want to play it as that. Like, have your fairies just kind of follow their heart. That's what I do. It's, yeah. like it's never really a big deal with fairies if one day their child comes in and, you know, refers to themselves differently. The fairies don't even blink. They just kind of go with it. This also means that polyamory is very accepted. Again, they are a free love community. Not in like a weird commune type of way, but they don't believe that Mother Nature would impose such strict rules upon them, because nature itself doesn't have strict rules in that nature. So you could choose to be poly, they could choose not to be poly. Like, either way, there is no set familial system, if that makes sense. It's nowhere near as strict as the vampires, and it's slightly more loosey-goosey than the mermaids. Like, they are they are free for all. They don't care if it's coming to you naturally, then it is natural. And that's how they see it. Now, of course, last but not least, my MC Command Center groups. Now, the reason I'm using MC Command Center groups specifically is because I increased my group size up to 15. Yes, there is a separate mod that allows you to do that. I just use MC Command Center to do that because I'm already using MC Command Center. And there's so many mods out there that do fantastic things that can just be done through MC Command Center. So I already have so many mods. I just need to use the mods I have to its fullest extent. Now, there are a few different terms for a few different groups of fairies, but they're not super strict, I guess, with their grouping. But here is like the different types of groups we can have, right? So the first one is called what is called a flutter. So this is just a popular term for a group of fairies. It is just like a group of friends. So if your fairy kid might come back home and ask their parent if their flutter, which would be like their main friend group, can come over for a sleepover or something like that. It's nothing set in stone. It's just a little term. Same way somebody might be like, oh, I'm gonna hang out with my girlfriends, or I'm gonna hang out with my homies. Fairies would just say, I'll hang out with my flutter, and these are just like their besto friendos. Next up is court. This is mostly used when I'm playing historical save files. The fairies will be split into courts, especially because they're monarchical. The monarchical nature of the fairies doesn't really mean too much in modern day outside of like keeping safe, I guess. But back in the day, especially when the courts first split while they were being hunted by humans and witches and trying to survive, having the courts and making sure everybody was getting along and keeping in contact with everybody and establishing like rules for safety, like making sure humans didn't see your wings and making sure that you weren't doing anything that would get you jeopardized or potentially any other fairies near you in jeopardy. Yeah, like these courts were very important. I'm not necessarily going for seelie versus unseelie or anything like that. It really just depends on what I want to do. I had a personal playthrough where I had like snow fairies who lived up in the mountains of Mount Komorebi. They were like the ice court, and sometimes they had to meet with like water fairies who lived in Sulani with the mermaids. So it was really, you could do whatever you want, but the groups, I guess, of fairies, especially if you're using the mod and having your fairies draw power from something different, if you're playing as Fae, then the court system can come really in handy, or it'll make things really fun, I should say. A frolic is kind of like a flutter. It's kind of seen as like the hooligans of fairies. These are mostly like somewhere they tread the line between being playful and being mischievous, right? No one would really say frolic unless they're like, it's kind of an insult. It's kind of like someone calling you like a hooligan or a street thug or something like that in fairy talk. Like you're just up to no good. Those badass group of kids got you doing stuff you ain't supposed to do. You need to be back at home. So there's that. There's a troop. Troops I only really use when I'm talking about traveling fairies, which I only really play in historical save files because they might be in a position where they need to move quite often, such as the fairies that moved between werewolf packs. They moved in troops, or, you know, back when fairies first split between Fae and fairies, the fairies, before they found Innisgreen, were traveling all over to try to find a safe place to live. So and last but not least is a raid. This is just a pair, like a procession of fairies at war. So rarely will fairies get tired enough to form battle fronts and things like that. But when they do, it is called a raid. You'll probably never see them coming. You'll probably just starve to death. They'll just kill your crops. Like there is no war. You're just dead, right? Again, those are not too important. The only ones that you'll probably hear me use most is in my Mystical Motherhood challenge. I have a fairy child right now. She's an Innisgreen Fae, so you won't be seeing all the cool Sylvan Fae stuff. Sorry guys, but she will have a flutter, which is just a group of fairy friends. So moving on to the specific werewolf mods that I like to use. Let's get started. First and foremost, I'm gonna get the funniest one out the way. I realized while I was making this video that Omegaverse mod existed, and I know at least 3 of you watching this have the Omegaverse tag bookmarked on your AO3 account. Yeah, this is for you. I haven't played with it specifically, but I read through it, so I'm gonna link it down below just because I think it's so funny, and I know some of y'all gonna be into that, so I'll put it down below because it seemed interesting. But if you play with the mod, let me know, how is it? How is it? I am so curious about how you play with it. I know how y'all freaks like to get down. All right, moving on to the actual mods I have played with / do play with. One of them, this first one, actually, I don't play with anymore, but I will explain why. And that is the Fated Mates mod. The Fated Mate mod came out a while back, I think like 2022 or something like that. But basically, it kind of changed the way Fated Mates worked in The Sims 4 Werewolves. If you have The Sims 4 Werewolves, you know that when werewolves fall in love with each other, there is a chance that they will be like the fated mates. And if any of you read like Wattpad back in the day or into like werewolf stories, you know that the like moon goddess fated mate thing is such a big trope. So that's kind of where it's coming from. So this mod, back when I was using it, there's 3 versions. There's Fated Mates, which any interaction can trigger it. It'll be linked down below so you can read through yourself and try to figure out what I'm talking about. I specifically used Fated Mate Be Any, which allowed my werewolves to figure out upon their first interaction with any sim, regardless of occult type, because I thought it would be cool if the fated mate wasn't just a werewolf, was their fated mate, and I considered that a soulmate. Now, the reason I don't use this mod anymore is specifically because I started using the Soulmates mod, which allows any and every sim to find their soulmate. Sometimes it could be like a soulmate at first sight, and sometimes it's like you get to know them over a period of time and then they realize, oh crap, this is my soulmate. So to me, I really haven't needed the Fated Mates mod because I use soulmates for all of my sims now. And I just consider the soulmate to be the fated mate of my werewolf sims if I'm playing with a werewolf. But if you just want like a soulmate aspect with just your werewolves, then the Fated Mate mod will be better than the Soulmate mod if you don't want like your vampires and your humans and anybody else having the soulmate thing. The next mod I use is the Wolves Attack and Kill Sims mod, which is exactly what it sounds like. This mod allows for the werewolves to attack and also kill werewolves, kill sims, I mean, because if they're in wolf form and just like losing their mind and attack people, I feel like people would die, especially if I'm playing like a more dramatic save rather than a silly one, or like a historical save or something like that. I feel like it makes a lot more sense. Very optional, but I like the idea of my occults being dangerous instead of just like silly. So that's why I use that mod. Next up, Werewolf Club activities. So this is why the MCC comes into place. I use MC Command Center for specifically bigger group sizes. There are like specific mods you can use for it, but I just go into MC Command Center to expand group sizes, but I know that there is a separate mod that allows for that. When I put the werewolves into their own groups, it allows them to, I guess with the use of this mod, do werewolf things. I treat it like a pack, like as if they're a werewolf pack. So it lets them do all the werewolf things, but I can list them as official activities, including howling, embracing werewolf nature, exploring tunnels, maybe even turning sims into werewolves if they have that ability, rampaging and smashing objects. I just think it makes things a lot more fun. And of course, because I'm using MC Command Center to make my groups bigger, I have it up to 15 sims, I think. It can get really chaotic, especially when it comes to like werewolf packs, which I find really fun. If to go into an area and there's just like a pack of 15 rampaging werewolves losing their mind, I just think that's really fun. And of course, spinning plumb bobs, our favorite occult creator. I use 2 of their mods, the first one being the Feral Containment Unit. I specifically like to use this in my modern day gameplays. because I feel like in modern day, when werewolves have a lot more access to different technologies and things like that, that for the safety of their family, especially because I have like, they could attack their family members and accidentally kill them if they're like furious enough. But this feral containment unit is basically just a little building. It's in build by, you plop it down onto the lot, and your rampaging werewolves can go in there to calm down, maybe transform safely, or, you know, relax if their fury is too high. Once again, because I have mods that allow my werewolves to autonomously attack and potentially kill people, this works for me so I don't accidentally kill off my family, and two, for storytelling purposes, because I feel like anybody who's a werewolf would take this into account. You know, like a vampire would always make sure they have plasma around. I feel like a werewolf would make sure they have a way to relax and not harm their loved ones. And of course, by the same creator, glimpse into everything it introduces, lichens, hybrids, everything. This is the mod where the hybrid stabilizer really helps out to ensure smooth hybrids if you're doing that. I'll be honest, I don't really use the lichens that much because I like the way the werewolves already are. But I do like that it introduces a lot of different things like the occult professor. When I have my werewolf sims go to university, he's like one of my favorite sims to interact with. I like, there's a, what is it called? Like a build trait? A lot trait, there we go. There's a lot trait that is called frequent animal attacks that I like to use in like werewolf hunting grounds, which is basically a bunch of werewolves will teleport there. And it'll increase like lichens that will show up as well as werewolves. Lichens are basically like a human werewolf hybrid. They look different than the werewolf sims, and they come with the mod. They're like, basically, they look the way the Sims 3 werewolves look, if that makes sense. And they have their own like lifestyle. There's a few objects. And what I like to use this mod for the most is that there's like a, is it called lycanthrope? I probably am mispronouncing that. But basically, I like to use it because it increases knowledge of, it acts like a werewolf lore or werewolf XP type of situation. And I like the objects that can help you kill a werewolf. And for me, because technically monster hunters or occult hunters in the way I play The Sims exist, I like to have them have, you know, weapons and knowledge of ways to potentially kill a werewolf if need be for storytelling purposes. So as always, I'm skimming through a lot here, and Spinning Plum Bobs has so many occult mods, but each one is like super well thought out and thorough and adds so much to gameplay. And I'll be honest, Werewolves is like one of my least favorites to play with base level, because it can get kind of boring and repetitive. But this mod adds so much that it's actually a lot more fun to play with werewolves. Because I'm not just like living everyday life and trying not to make them mad. I can actually do things with them. So just keep in mind, it works super well with the Werewolves game pack. And one of the reasons it works really well is because it actually existed before the Werewolves game pack came out. And so the integration there is like fantastic. So just keep that in mind. And those are my mods that I use for werewolves. Historians are unsure of exactly who the first werewolf was, but there is a story that is widely agreed upon. A man, part of ancient civilization, attacked by beasts while hunting with his tribe. All the other hunters were killed, but this man managed to get away with just a few scratches and a stinging bite, which infected him with werebeasts. These painful injuries were accompanied by a hunger that grew and grew until he was ravenous. And one night, under the light of a full moon, he transformed, attacking blindly at the rest of his tribe and spreading this werewolf curse. Early werewolves were nomadic hunter-gatherers that kept two small tribes, which eventually turned into what they call packs. Over time, they integrated into human society as it grew. But their habits and abilities were difficult to hide. Werewolves were known for their uncontrollable fury. They frequently attacked humans, livestock, and even the game that everybody needed to hunt in order to survive. Humans called them beasts and blamed werewolves for pretty much any violent attack, even if the werewolves themselves were not the perpetrators. Hunters began to track down werewolves for sport, and spellcasters tracking them for potions. Over time, they realized that, well, staying together in large groups was no longer going to be an option, and hiding amongst humans was even more difficult. Just like vampires, they scattered about, going deep into hunting lands and forests, which actually caused centuries of dispute with the vampires, mostly over land and food resources, being humans, fish, and other animals. Werewolves needed to eat these animals to survive, which dwindled the population of fish and every game available, and of course the vampires needed them for their blood. But it's difficult for vampires to get blood if all that's left is a rotting corpse, and well, werewolves don't like meat that's been left behind. While werewolves were not big fans of the spellcasters who hunted them for potions, or the vampires who they had centuries of war with over land and food, they became pretty good friends with fairies. Fairies that were running away in search of safety stumbled across many werewolf packs, and these werewolves became the physical protectors of these fairies and trading partners. Fairies didn't necessarily need to hunt, but they were great at gardening. Fairies didn't necessarily need to hunt, and they were great at gardening and really loved taking away the negative emotions, the fury, of werewolves. Eventually, after centuries, werewolves managed to mostly settle into Moonwood Mills. Many worked as hunters, dog breeders, any type of physical labor they were great at. In modern day, werewolves now have the resources to make living amongst humans and other sims safer for them and everyone around them. So there's a lot more integration of werewolves from the city to the outskirts, but most still have quite a big connection to Moonwood Mills and see that land as nearly ancestral. Of course, there are a few rules, quote unquote, that I play with my werewolves. And when I say rules, they aren't like hard stop rules. These are just really how I like to play with them, kind of give me some ideas about how they interact with each other and everyone else. So first and foremost, werewolves do not have really big gender roles, I guess. It is definitely pack based. And if any of you have seen my mermaid lore video, you'll know that in their pods, the gender also doesn't really matter. It's more about their role in the pods, and werewolves work in a similar way. I would say they might have more gender roles in older saves. Like if I'm playing a historical challenge, then they would care a lot more about gender. But it really depends on the society. So if I'm playing modern day society, they don't care. But if I'm playing a historical save, they will have a few more roles, I guess. Whatever the gender roles of that society are, they'll play into it. So first and foremost, every werewolf must be part of a pack. So when a werewolf is born, they will automatically join the family pack, which is really just going to be made up of the main family unit. So maybe grandparents, potentially aunts and uncles, and then the children that are born. This is why I have my groups, I guess. What do they call? Yes. This is why I have my groups in MC Command Center set to be higher. I have it at 15. I think the highest I've ever had it is 20, but I've never really needed 20 sims in a pack, to be honest. But that's part of their pack. And packs can be changed later on in life. but they can only be part of one pack. They can't join multiple. So the birth pack, they might not stick with. Maybe they'll choose to like form a pack of their own. It really depends on how you want to play with it and the storyline of whatever Sims you're playing as. So packs can just be found family, like a bunch of friends. They can be similar to Mermaids and very village-esque, or they can just be made up of bloodlines and family units. It's super versatile and flexible. There's no like set rules on what a pack means. The pack is whatever is important to that sim or whatever story you're trying to tell. Now, there are packless werewolves, and the way I play them, they're more prone to fury. So being in a pack is very important because packless werewolves are a lot more uncontrollable, potentially volatile. They don't really have protection. It's definitely more of a protection in numbers type of thing. Now, is every pack a good pack? No, you can absolutely be part of a pack that's bad for the sim, but they'll typically try to get into a pack or form a pack of their own. Again, this is how you want to play it, right? If you're born into a pack and you like the siblings and parents and them do not get along with whatever sim you're playing as, they can choose to be packless, but it might not be the best for their mental health. So packs and not necessarily family units, but you know, support systems are very important, which is why packs are very important, especially for like little kids. Like there's no way that there's going to be a child werewolf who does not have a pack. By the time they're the child state of life, mostly because infants and toddlers can't be part of packs, they'll most likely be adopted into a pack. So, but if there's a case where, let's say, you have a child sim who may be orphaned or maybe was never around a pack of werewolves or something like that, it can be difficult. Now, unlike mermaids, packs don't necessarily have to be just werewolves, but I try to have at least 2 of them. Packs are just whoever the sim has the best connection with, I should say. So if you have a werewolf who's adopted and nobody in the family or none of their friends are another werewolf, they might consider them pack, but they'll still need to get their werewolf tendencies, I guess. Their werewolf instincts, I should say, fueled maybe by like a werewolf friend or a mentor or somebody, even if they're not pack. But I try to have at least 2 in the same pack because I feel like they like help each other out. Now, if you have the Rambunctious Religions mod, like I said, for storytelling purposes, I really like to have the mod in. So my werewolves technically are treaders of the occult, which is the occult-centric religion that's part of that mod. But I specifically have them worship the moon goddess. She doesn't have a name. She's just called the moon goddess. I mean, I could give her a name, but I don't. They worship the moon goddess and they believe she is the one who gives them their mate and everything like that and guide them and everything like that. But they don't have that deep of a connection with her. Not in the same way I have my fairies have a connection with Mother Nature. They just like worship the moon goddess because they think that the moon helps give them their abilities and their strength and everything like that. So moon goddess. Packs, again, don't really have specific roles, but they must have a leader and a second in command. So there's not like, how do I say this? I'm not going to say that they're not unequal, but the leader is a leader for a reason. They have to step up. Now, they could be a bad leader, but there has to be a set leader, and that leader can choose a second in command. Again, if it's a family unit, it can be however you want to play. Gender rules, no gender rules, whatever you want to do. It could be the parents, the grandparents, it could be male-centric, it can be whatever you want, but there has to be like, I don't want to say the word alpha because this is not Omegaverse, but there has to be a leader. He can have whatever title you want. If it's alpha or beta, whatever you desire can be what you call them. But it has to be a leader and a set second in command in case something happens to the leader or if the leader's like busy. The pack roles are very similar to mermaids, pretty much the same. Like I said, village mindset. Well, I guess less of a village mindset, more of a werewolf mindset. So like children or as they're called, like pups, have to be very much protected. If you're playing a non-modern save, then there might be like set hunters, there might be set caretakers. Again, very much however you want to play it. But lone wolves are very dangerous. They're unable to manage their fury on their own for the most part, so they can have a bit more of a difficult time. Now, if you're playing with multiple packs, and I make my packs, which is why the groups are important. I know packs come with the game, but I feel like they're kind of stifling in what they can do. So that's why I like to make my own. But pack leaders, however you want to play it, but whoever the leaders of the packs are, especially if you have multiple packs, they kind of form a council. They don't really have to interact. They could be at war with each other or whatever, but I like this council for like if there is a bigger threat to werewolves, they might have to suck it up and work together just for a little bit. So if you're playing an older save during a time period where werewolves and vampires are like at war, and let's say there's two packs, but they also don't like each other, they might suck it up for a little bit to protect their food resources and their packs from other vampires, right? And depending on how you're playing it, there could also be like arranged marriages. There could be a lot. You could play high society, low society, village-esque. Again, pretty versatile. My werewolves only ever get with their soulmate or their true mate, which is where their fated mod comes into play, or the soulmates mod comes into play. So, you know, they could potentially have like a little fling, a little flirty flirt with some other people, but they only ever get married and have pups with their soulmate, especially once they find their soulmate. So like if you don't have a soulmate, but you're getting married and having a child, it's seen as super taboo. Even in modern saves, it's considered like going against the goddess. And the same thing with cheating. So Werewolf Society takes cheating on your soulmate very seriously. It's not considered cheating if you don't know who your soulmate is, like if you haven't met or if you haven't realized it's your soulmate yet, because with the soulmate mod, it's not always love at first sight. Sometimes it takes a minute to kick in. But if you know who your soulmate is, whether or not y'all are in a romantic relationship and you're still choosing to go with someone else, it's considered very taboo because you're going against the will of the goddess, right? The moon goddess is the one who fated y'all together, and you are actively going against her wishes and basically saying, no, I know myself better than you know me, right? Like, I'm gonna get with this person. So yes, that also means children of two people who are not fated mates. Werewolf Society might not treat them the best. It might not be their fault. And again, because my werewolves aren't necessarily only fated to other werewolves because of the way I play it, there's a lot of in between there, especially once we get to hybrids. But for the most part, they'll accept it, even if it's begrudgingly, if they are soulmates. So like, that's the most important thing. Like, you could do whatever you want, but do not have kids and do not get married to someone that is not your soulmate. And of course, the Werewolf Society, they have ranks, right? So there's pups and runts and all that. I call them something different. I know in the actual game, like the lowest level werewolf is considered a pup. I don't consider them pups because I consider child werewolves pups. Even though they can't like transform or anything like that, I consider children pups and kind of teenagers, to be honest. But because teenagers can turn, I consider them runts. So if you're going by the, I should have had a picture of that thing pulled up, but if you're going based off of the skill tree, I just ignore the pup one and consider that a runt, basically like a weak werewolves. Basically, pups / runts can only hunt with higher ranks. So they aren't just out there by themselves. They're essentially being taught how to hunt and how to do so efficiently. And if you're playing a medieval save, and you're using the hunting and foraging mod, for example, I consider that some of their hunt as well. So I might cheat down their fury a little bit if they're hunting that way, but they can't go by themselves. I know that's kind of crazy. If you watch my Ultimate Decades Challenge, I'm definitely sending kids by themselves, but they're not werewolves. They're alien spellcaster hybrids, okay? But yeah, so there's, again, they're very protected, and runts have to learn how to be werewolves, especially because their fury rises so quick at that level. So yeah. Moving on to the actual spellcaster mods that I use. The first one is Better Familiars mod. The Better Familiars mod is one of my favorite familiars mod. I think my absolute favorite familiars mod that I use. Basically, it really expands on what familiars do in The Sims 4. So this mod allows the spellcaster familiars to, they'll randomly put potion ingredients, especially ones that are hard to find, in your inventory. If you want to go through the, the whole hassle, I guess, of going manually and doing whatever you got to do for that, is fine, but I don't always feel like doing that, so sometimes it's helpful that they just randomly put something in your inventory. I take it as like they just went off on their own and came back and did it type of thing. You can also talk to your familiars. It has like an invisible social bar and everything like that, so you can have a relationship with your familiar, which I feel like would be a really big part of being a spellcaster with a familiar. But it just really builds upon them so much, and it will give you an experience boost. I think it's 50% experience boost. Yeah, yes, it is. So again, just a very fun expansion on familiars, just to give them something else to do and to actually have them aid your spellcaster beyond just like them keeping you from dying if you like overexert yourself. The next one is the Forbidden Spells mod. This mod just adds a lot of dark, I guess, and forbidden spells that even sages don't have that come with the game. So all of these spells belong to the Untamed School of Magic. So if you're playing, I guess if you're doing some type of lore where Untamed is like really scary and people really can't control it and don't want to know what to do with it and stuff like that, this is perfect for that. So you cannot learn these spells from sages, which is part of the forbidden part. Your sim has to discover them on their own through normal practice, which I think is really fun. There may or may not be some tomes that come with it, but they're pretty expensive, or you can win knowledge of it through like duels. So to go over like some of the spells, there's Enervate, which is one of my favorite ones to use for my evil spellcasters. It siphons the vitality of another sim to restore their own energy, kind of like an energy vampire type of situation. You can have bees attack a sim. You can inflict an illness on another sim, like literally cause a plague. And again, if you're playing with like storytelling, this is really fun for like an evil or a dark witch or something like that. Another one that I really like to use, I think it's the last one actually. You can draw on your sim's life force to replenish all of their needs. But it will usually come with like consequences. So just keep that in mind. But again, these are really fun extra spells. It's just a few of them, and they're really fun to play with. Especially if you're doing something with like a selfish witch who's like keeping herself young and stealing energy and stuff like that. The next one I really like to use is the Black Magic mod. With this mod, you can become a blood mage. You can have like pacts with death and things like that. Like every stereotypical thing you think of, like a really dark and gritty 16th century witch or something like that, like pacts with the Grim Reaper, using blood magic, all of that you can do with this mod, like this necromantic rituals and extra potions. I think there's 8 potions and 8 rituals, something like that. There's different death interactions, and the creator of these mods has a lot of different spellcaster and vampire themed mods. So again, everything will be linked down below so you can see for yourself. But if you use this Black Magic mod with the Vampires Can Kill mod that I talked about in my vampires video, that Vampires Can Kill have a sanguine pact situation you can do. Your blood mages can have a sanguine pact with a vampire if you have the Vampires Can Kill mod. And another mod I'm going to go over in a second called Expanded Realm of Magic. If you use both of these mods together, it unlocks a few extra spells like feeding Sims to a cow plant. I think you can mind control a skeleton and ghosts and stuff like that. You can mind control Sims. Like, you can actually do a lot. Again, if you want to play like a really dark and evil type of witch, this is like the perfect mod to use for it. So let's just go right into Expanded Realm of Magic, since I was just talking about it. By the same creator as the Black Magic mod. You can play as a sage and have like a sage career type of thing instead of sages being unplayable completely. There is better autonomy for NPC sages. There are extra spells, some custom, and some are like the classic spells that have just been expanded upon. You can turn Sims into dust, which I really like to do. I think that's really funny. You can cause like earthquakes and like tornadoes and stuff like that. It's really fun. I think there's really just mischief and untamed spells. No, there's a few practical spells in there too. Yeah, there's quite a few different spells. You can force Sims to be nice, like no mean interaction is allowed at all. It's really fun. And again, it works super well with the Black Magic mod. And of course, it's also really good if you are romancing one of the mages, or one of the sages, I should say, and you want them to join your household. They won't just quit being a sage, which I've always found kind of silly. You can have a sage in your household using this mod, which I really like the idea of, because why can I romance Morgan and then they quit their job? That's dumb. Okay. Let me have my Morgan sage romance, please. All right, next up is it's an older mod. It's one of the first, not one of the first mods, but like I think one of the biggest mods to come out when Realm of Magic came out, and that is the Deadly Spellcasters mod. It is exactly as it sounds. It takes the well, actually it's been updated quite a bit since then, but it gives you essentially a death version of a lot of the spells that come with Realm of Magic. It is not automatic. It doesn't mean that every single spell, especially those under the Mischief and Untamed categories, will automatically be deadly. It doesn't do that at all. You can specifically choose the deadly interaction, though there's no confusion there. But like the Inferniate spell, there's like a death version of Inferniate that can burn Sims to death. Electrocution and Rage, like all the emotional deaths that are there. You can make them die of exhaustion. Like just about in most deaths that come with the packs, there's probably a spell version of that in this mod. Again, it just gives you the ability to kill Sims. And I think there is a version of this called Multiple Deaths, where anybody who's within like a 12 feet radius of your Sim, they'll all die automatically of that spell. So of course, this also comes with setbacks. Your Sims, the NPCs won't just ignore that this is happening. They'll react really negatively to murder. The spells have a chance to fail, and I think it really increases your chance of just dying because you're using a death spell. It's all inside of an orb that's in build by that you place inside of your Sim's inventory, so it's not like every Sim is automatically a deadly spellcaster. You can like really pick and choose. Or you can just choose when to bring it in and out for spellcaster purposes, for like storytelling purposes and stuff like that. Next up is one that has come out recently since the Faeries mod, not Faeries mod, but what is it called? The Faeries pack come out. But basically it allows curses that come with that pack to be spells. Now, if you've watched my fairy video, you know that I only allow the curses to be placed by fairies. But if I have I don't use this one as much because I have hybrids and because I strictly want my fairies to be able to be the ones that give out these specific curses. I would only allow my fairies or my fairy spellcaster hybrids to do so. But if you're not someone who likes to play with hybrids, but you still want the ability, I guess, for someone that's not other than a fairy to hand out curses like this, then this mod is perfect. All of the curses that come with the imbalance system from that pack, with this mod, your spellcaster sims can give them out like curses using a spell. So I think that it is really fun for that reason. But if you've watched my fairy video, you know I already have a way to go about this, and then my curses aren't infectious and things like that, so just keep that in mind. And the creator of this does have a note that says spellcasters who have the hexproof perk can and will get curses from the spells. So they have a whole reason as to why. Again, you can open and read for yourself. This is the same creator as the hybrid mod, so they work compatibly. I don't use it as much because I use hybrids, but if I was not using hybrids, I would absolutely give this to my spellcaster sims as well. Next up is one that was talked about briefly in my fairies video, but this is the fairies versus witches mod. In that video, I mostly went over the fairy section of that, but the witches section is very similar. So ignoring the entire fairy portion, this mod allows a lot of different things. It is very fun to play with. You can have your child sims actually be witches. There's a distinction between witches and spellcasters using this mod, by the way. You cannot use this mod. You can't turn your spellcaster sim into a witch because the creator has some overlap between the systems. So you kind of have to pick one or the other. But again, it could be really fun for storytelling purposes to have your spellcaster give up that spellcaster magic and choose to be a witch, or vice versa. But with this mod, you can have child witches. Your witches can they can pull energy from different things throughout the world the same way the fairies can. So I've made a witch character, she pulls from nature, but I also had someone who pulled from I think she pulled from illusion magic, something like that. Like, it goes really in depth. It goes really, really deep. There's like a whole different potion system that adds so many different potions that don't involve the realm of magic potions at all. Again, it operates very separately from realm of magic, so keep that in mind. You can have both realm of magic and witches, but with this mod, if you don't have realm of magic, this gives you an opportunity and a way to have the witch system without necessarily having spellcasters. But it has a whole completely different system for how its magic works, a whole different system for how its potions work and what they look like and everything like that. So it's very fun, especially if you want to play, like, I guess D&D style type of witch, or you're making like a druid or something like that. Like, it gives you more options to what your witch can look like than Realm of Magic offers. But I like to have both because there's a distinction that I play between spellcasters and witches. But that mod is extremely extensive, and it also includes fairies, and there's a little bit of overlap between like their magic and like how witches get their witch power, which involves kidnapping and giving a sprite to a witch ghost. So again, it's very fun to play with. It's very dark, and it has a good versus bad system. So the more your fairies, or in this case your witches also, are doing good things and pulling from good magic and being good people, they will lean more towards the good side, and opposite of that, they will lean towards the evil side. And there are pros and cons to both. So it does offer some level of importance, I guess, to how your sim acts and what you want them to do, because their actions do have consequences with their magic, which I also really love. Next up is a really fun one that honestly should have been like an inter-pack integration already, but it's not, so it's a mod instead, and that is the Magic Mediums mod. Basically, if you're a spellcaster using the ghost summoning table that comes with the paranormal pack, your spellcasters can summon a ghost. That's really it. I think you have to be level 5 in the medium skill, and you can summon your ghost friends at the seance table. You can't summon ghosts you don't have a relationship with, or you weren't like acquaintances or friends in the real life. but I think it's really fun. I think there's a difference between magic mediums and super mediums. So even if you aren't playing a spellcaster specifically with this mod, there will be a way for your Sims to, outside of the magic pie menu, to invite a ghost, but it'll drain your energy, like your sleep energy, instead of the spellcaster charge orb. But if your Sim is like in a bad mood, they won't even be able to use it. So yeah. And of course there'll be no Spellcaster XP, which there will be if you use the magic version. And that same creator also has another mod that I really like to use that again should have been something introduced in cross packs, but whatever. And this is the Crystal Arcana mod. And basically this mod, if your spellcaster has the attuned reward trait, they can use the jewelry from that jewelry pack to, they can charge it. And that'll help out with like their spellcaster charge and everything, and they can take it off and put it back on. So I like to use it for storytelling purposes because I do have certain Sims who a lot of their magic comes from the charged jewelry as opposed to their own strength. So the jewelry's charge won't drain as long as once equipped, the jewelry's charge will not drain as long as the spellcaster is wearing it. So it's very fun, especially for storytelling purposes, when I have like a weak spellcaster or something like that who's getting their or someone else who's getting their charge from a piece of jewelry like this. I really like the cross between these two. And this last one isn't necessarily a spellcaster mod, but I feel like it is really best talked about in the spellcaster section. And that is the Divine Ascension mod. It is actually fairly new, and I played it on my own a little bit just for fun. Y'all, this mod is so fun. Briefly, really doesn't have much to do with spellcasters, but it does introduce an entire different system of like angels, demons, and like the powers in between. So do with that as you will. I'm still learning about and playing with the mod. Like I said, it's really fun and it is very new, so there's still quite a bit I haven't learned quite yet and haven't explored quite yet, but I'm having a great time with it. There's so many different caveats, which is why I can't really go too deep into detail, but it will be linked down below so you can read about it and play it on your own, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about how deep it goes. This is by the same creator who made the Faeries versus Witches mod, the Plantsims mod, and the expanded Mermaids mod. So they really go all out with these occult mods, and they're all super deep and expansive. Spellcasters don't have a specific point of origin. As far as Sims are aware, they popped up across the globe. Most were spiritualists and healers for tribes. They prayed to various gods and got their hands on magical artifacts. Early humans saw these powers as gifts. At the time, practical magic was the oldest and first form of magic. It was used for cleaning, handling crops, cooking, keeping everybody alive and happy. Over time, magic grew darker. Mischievous and untamed, unforeseen magic was abundant. Over time, magic grew darker. It grew mischievous and untamed. Witches drew on power beyond themselves, evoking magical abilities. These dark witches used mortal sacrifices and pulled from fairies and mermaids for their own potions and spells. The difference in use of dark magic led to a devastating civil war amongst spellcasters, which led to the eventual destruction of the realm of magic, leaving only the academy and the shopping district, and a small portion of a garden and a training ground standing. The spellcasters split. They refused for centuries to have a formal government and rules. Instead, they formed small groups of their own, sticking to one form of magic and calling themselves covens. Those with practical magic saw how dark and terrible the world was becoming and helped form the cult of the cow plant. Much later, as the magic of the untamed grew, spellcasters came to an agreement that despite the lack of formal government, balance was to be kept through the use of sages. Other spellcasters, ones who were trusted and voted into a small council, would only interfere with the will of the spellcasters if needed. So, my spellcasters do have a few rules, but as you can see, unlike if you've seen my previous parts, they're probably the least formal of all of my occults. They don't really have a formal government or anybody that they follow or any particular rules. It really can depend, but there are a few that I do follow across all of my spellcasters, but a lot of the time my rules will depend on whether or not I'm playing fairies. Whoa, nothing to do with fairies here. The rules will depend on whether or not I'm playing with spellcasters that come with Realm of Magic, or if I'm playing with witches that come with the Fairies versus Witches pack. That's where the word fairy is coming from. You know, what type of magic they're practicing, what time period I'm in, things like that. So they're probably my most versatile occult that I play with. But let's get into it. So one of the first rules I have, this mostly goes for rich spellcasters and those who are not necessarily peasants in my UDC challenge. So if you're watching that and you're like, Morgan, you've never done this, there's a reason. But the first one I follow, spellcaster parents gift a familiar that reflects them to their child sims. The teen sims, the teen spellcaster sims, they choose their own as their power manifest that they feel reflects their own personality. And then once they're older, if they decide to get married, spouses will gift each other a familiar as a sign of protection and equality and things like that. So all my spellcasters usually have 2 or 3 familiars if possible. I say if possible because I'm playing the Ultimate Decades Challenge and they're peasants, but they're also like alien Spellcaster Hybrids, but they're also like not really in a position where they even come across familiars or anything like that. So we don't really see this practice, but this is typically a practice I do. You probably see it a bit more in my Occult Baby Challenge with my Spellcaster Sim, who's my firstborn. But yeah, so the first gift they get is one as a child, and the spellcaster parents give them one that they feel reflects them as parents to their child for one, companionship, especially because I have that mod where the sims can actually befriend and talk to and all that with their familiars, but also because the familiars stop them from dying, so it's a sign of protection. And to other spellcasters, it's a sign that like you are a strong spellcaster and you are also you're a non-absent parent, like you're around. You're not necessarily a good parent, but you are there. So it could be used for a variety of different things. Sometimes it's not really even about the kid, especially if you don't really have good parents. It might just be to prove something to other spellcasters, right? Like a sign that's just like, hey, this child's mine, right? The teenage sims, you can choose whether or not you want them to be teens when they do this or young adults. I started doing it as teens, but the teenage sims, or once they reach a certain level, something like that, they'll go out and choose a familiar that reflects them in the best possible way that they want to be. And then they'll trade them with spouses and then they'll trade one with spouses. So each of my sims will typically have 3, which is the max amount of familiars you can have anyways. And I just trade them out depending on the sim or what's going on or something like that. I like to imagine that different familiars are better or worse at different things. I don't really have anything officially written down. That's just based on vibes. The next rule I have, spellcasters have to master one branch of magic before they can move on to the rest. Again, this is specifically for spellcasters because the witch system from Fairies versus Witches works very differently. There is no tree. There's no like magic tree for the spells they learn. It's very different, but yes, but if my sims, once they reach their teenagehood, alchemy is for everybody, so alchemy isn't included as part of like a branch, but they have to choose between whether or not they want to master practical magic, untamed magic, or mischievous magic. They have to choose. Now, if you're doing something, I had a very brief mini series called Magic Families, and the families had to master, each of them represented a different branch of the magic. So everybody in that family had to master whatever their family's branch of magic was before they could learn a spell from a different branch. So there's that. But I typically try to keep them on one branch because I feel like the branches kind of I feel like they choose the branch that best fits their personality. That's how I'm gonna say that. I feel like they choose the branch that best fits their personality. And same with the witches mod. With the witches mod, you can only pull from one type of magic anyways. So there's that, but you can keep trading it out to learn other spells and things like that. But with that mod, I do like to stick to one type of magic and learn as many spells in that category as possible. But that mod, if you have the witch book with that mod, it will tell you like which branches work best with and work worst with whatever magic you chose to pull from. So I hope that makes sense because I don't have a visual up on screen. But yes, modern day witches are not allowed or should not be using fairy familiars unless they are like evil and just don't care. So if you've seen my fairy lore video, or if you haven't, but the fairy familiars are basically fairies from back in the day that were killed, corrupted, and forced into an impure state of like magical servitude. They're fairies that existed and had autonomy and were people way back in the day. So familiars is essentially using a fairy familiar, especially in front of other fairies, is damn near like parading around a slave or something like that. So it's taboo. Again, this is mostly for my modern fairies, and that is specifically because I didn't put a lot of the spellcaster battles in this video because they're scattered throughout the others. Spellcasters have a very long history of hurting other occults and using them as part of their potions and their spells, and fairies were a really big one that they were hunting down for a long time. They're the ones who damn near drove them to extinction because they helped humans break into the Sylvan Glade to get to the fairies to begin with. They were also hunting down mermaids too. Spellcasters are not really good people. A lot of occults, humans are scared of everybody, but of the occults, all of them are most afraid of spellcasters and vampires. But really the spellcasters, they have been historically a big problem. If you want to know more about exactly what they were doing, they're in the lore of the other occults because they're running from them. But yeah, but the fairy familiar, especially in modern day when they're supposed to be like living amongst other occults and good people and things like that, the fairy familiar is very frowned upon. But again, if you're playing a spellcaster who is evil or they just don't give a damn, hey, let them face the consequences of their own actions. But I did say this in my fairy rules, but if a fairy catches a spellcaster with a fairy familiar, they're going to be enemies immediately. I will cheat them to be immediate enemies because they know that they have a fairy familiar. Now, if they're gifted one and they never activate that bond, that's different because you can't really control like what your parents give you or what your spouse gives you or something like that, especially if it's like an arranged marriage storyline or something like that. But just keep that in mind. The fairy familiars probably should not be seen out in public. Now let's get into the coven conversation. I kind of touched briefly on this in the lore section or the history section. I'll say this, there's two different types of covens. There is the familiar coven that you're born into, and there's one that you choose. All spellcasters spellcasters don't have to have a coven, I will say, but if they are going to be in a coven, they'll typically choose to be in one, like once they're young adults and decide if they want to leave their family's coven to be part of a one full of friends or chosen family or something like that. Very fine. That's completely fine. But covens are really mostly there for the sake of training teenagers and young adults. So it's being covenless and everything like that isn't really that bad. For spellcasters, witches, with the mod, I do have them being covens. I try to stick them with people who are of similar mindsets. So not necessarily similar magic, but I try to form the covens based on bonds more than the type of magic they use. But for regular spellcasters, the covens are whatever I decide it is for the story. I'm not gonna lie. It's very loosey-goosey around these parts. Another rule I have is sages must remain neutral. This also goes for if you're playing as a sage. So yes, there is one sage for each branch of magic using Realm of Magic. And according to my lore, that they're mostly there for like training purposes and to help keep magic, or their specific branch of magic, make sure it's being used properly, make sure people are trained in it properly, because even practical magic can be very dangerous if improperly trained. But that said, because they have been in so many wars and so many conflicts and everything like that, and because sages do train, they can't really be blamed for the actions of a spellcaster for teaching them certain spells. And they can't get into like inter-spellcaster conflict and things like that. So if somehow or another a group of spellcasters went to war, whether or not the sages agree or disagree with whatever the battle's about, they cannot join the war. They must remain neutral. If the untamed spellcasters or the mischievous spellcasters just decided to start doing something crazy, the untamed and mischievous sages cannot be involved. Like, if they are going to decide to align themselves in one particular position, they will lose their spellcaster rank. I mean, not spellcaster rank, good lord. They will lose their sage title, because the entire point is neutrality. Spellcasters have already destroyed the Realm of Magic by being aggressive, right? So the sages are some of the most powerful beings in the Realm of Magic. They're literally put into this position to teach the masses until the day they die. So they are not allowed to be involved in a lot of these conflicts. Battles to the death. So if you are, again, fighting to the death with one of these mods, that cannot be done inside the Realm of Magic, because they've played these games before. If you want to kill each other, no one's gonna stand in your way. Go do it on Earth. Get out of the Realm of Magic. You can have a friendly duel. You can even have an angry duel. Y'all can duke it out all you want. Do not kill. Do not introduce more blood to the Realm of Magic. We've already destroyed ourselves. Okay, there's like 3 rocks left. Let's not destroy one of the 3 left. Now, the Realm of Magic, if y'all remember what it looks like, there are rivers of what appears to be pure magic. That said, anything that is consumable coming out of the Realm of Magic, that you're buying from the stalls in the market area, cannot be eaten, because they're being pulled from the pure magic of that realm. So if you find fish for potions or fruit for potions and stuff like that, they specifically have to be used for potions, or maybe something else, like, but it cannot be. You can even plant them, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot just like buy an apple that you're using for like the full fulfillment needs potion and then just eat it. Because I personally say that because you're eating something that has been grown in or survived in or taken from rivers and orchards of pure magic, you will overexert yourself. You're eating magic, and I will literally cheat in overexertion, so you better hope your familiar is out, because I take that very seriously. So you cannot consume anything that comes out of the Realm of Magic. They don't have a food stall there for a reason, right? Even trying to make mac and cheese in one of the cauldrons inside of the academy is like, I wouldn't risk it. I really wouldn't risk it. There's probably too much contamination. Like, do not eat anything that came out of that realm or was made in that realm. I'd advise against eating or drinking anything in there anyways, but bring a snack from the outside realm, from the human realm or something like that. But do not consume anything that you bought or made inside the Realm of Magic, because it is just pure magic. You will overexert yourself, especially if you're weaker, or like a weaker spellcaster. Spellcasters did not come together formally until the colonial period. They're not like formally together as I just said, but they didn't really start addressing each other as a race, I guess, until about that period, because it was like the witch trials and everything like that had been happening between the medieval period to now, mixed with their civil war, really decimated all of them. So they were like, okay, we don't get along, but we do kind of need to stay together. It's not really a rule. I guess it's more of a rule for my lore if I'm playing historically. Only Realm of Magic spellcasters have familiars. That's not really a rule. That's just like there are no witches and fairies versus there's no familiars and fairies versus witches. And like I said earlier, spellcasters can't even, sorry, the witches can't even also be spellcasters. Not in that way. There is a hybrid system with that mod. I don't really use it because I have my own hybrid system, but yeah, only Realm of Magic spellcasters have familiars. But for rules or lore purposes, I say it's because the witches, they're pulling their magic from sprites. So it is seen as impure and dark just kind of off the bat, even if they're an angelic or a good person. It is kind of already seen as like an impure form of magic because that magic doesn't flow through their veins. It was granted artificially. So familiars are really only attracted to people who have magic flowing through their blood. So I said rule, but it's really more of a caveat. And last but not least, spellcasters / witches, again, very distinct. Like I just said, it's mostly a conversation about natural magic versus learned magic. For those of you who are in D&D, that's right, I played Baldur's Gate 3 and I'm not done yet with, but it's more of like a sorcerer versus wizard conversation. You know what I mean? That's kind of the vibe I'm going for when I say spellcasters versus witches. So let's move on to the actual mods I use for Mermaid specifically. It's not a lot. So the minor mod I use for Mermaids is Little Miss Sam's toddler playing oceans with seashells. I'll never say that word right. Instead of a duck. It's just a visual change. It just replaces the duck that toddlers play in like little waves with the seashell. It doesn't do anything. I just like it because it's, I don't know, I think it's way cuter to be on the beach and have your Sims children play with the seashell, especially if you're playing with like a mermaid child or playing a historical save where rubber ducks quite don't exist yet. So I just think it's really fun. It's such a minor thing, but I love it. Now, the only other mod I use is the Expanded Mermaids mod, but that is such a big mod. Honestly, the creator of the mod has like his own video or her own video on here going over his own video. Sorry, I don't really remember their pronouns, but has their own video on here going over everything the mod has to offer. It's being constantly updated, but to give the gist, it offers a whole new like lore system, I guess, if you want to call it that. A whole new lore system for mermaids, a bunch more interactions for mermaids. You can have mermaid children, so like you can have a child with a mermaid form. Like it expands mermaids like exponentially. So to me, mermaids, because of how limited they are, mermaids and aliens kind of have it the worst in The Sims 4. Expanded mermaids is damn near a necessity for me, in my opinion. But yeah, it adds so many new interactions, so much to do. Like I genuinely can't just, it would take me the whole rest of the video just going over what that mod can offer. So I highly recommend checking out that mod for yourself if you are playing with mermaids. And it also allows you to have different, I guess, mermaidic races as well. So of course there's mermaids, but you can also have kelpies. So that's fun. It introduces sea witches. I play my sea witches slightly differently because it goes into my lore, but I'll explain that in just a second. But yeah, those are the only two mods I use specifically for mermaids. So those mixed with my general mods, I'm usually pretty okay. Like I don't really have any anymore that I try to do with them. Mermaids were once completely human. A long, long time ago, their ancestors were stranded on an island that was quickly depleted of its resources. They ate all the food, hunted the animals, and were in a state struggling to survival. People were passing from illness and starvation daily. One day, a brave explorer was led by a cat into a cave. He explored the cave curiously and came across this magical kelp. Desperate and starving, he ate this kelp, believing it to be a vegetable that would cure his hunger. Upon eating the kelp, he felt a pull that led him to the terrifying ocean. The waves they hadn't dared to explore it since their ship first crashed years ago. He attempted to resist this pull as long as possible, but could not resist the temptation and entered the ocean. He was surprised to find himself taking the form of half fish as soon as he touched the water. He was able to breathe beneath the salty waves without fear of drowning, and felt a compulsion to hunt for the fish and kelp down below. His day passed quickly, and he filled himself up on the fish and seaweed down below. Once he returned to the surface and took on the form of man once again, he spread this magical kelp with the rest of the survivors. They took to the seas and started a new life, repopulating quickly, living happily amongst the fish with plenty to eat, plenty of spare time, and a new found civilization. They lived happily between the ocean and the peaceful islands. For generations, they lived in relative isolation, only venturing deep under the sea where humans could not see. However, humans began to spread to their land and their seas, curiously coming across their islands. As they came across these islands, they saw these half men, half fish, and were enthralled. Many of the mermaids were hunted and kidnapped. Some were forced to work on fishing ships, docks, and kept as exotic pets for some of the elite. Mermaids began fighting back, using their abilities to lure ship captains and sailors to their deaths, cause confusion in the open seas, and the strongest of mermaids could summon thunderous storms and waves that could turn about the strongest boat. This retaliation led humans to believe mermaids to be killers and manipulators, using their attractive physiques and alluring voices to manipulate the minds and emotions of humans and wield the power of gods to form storms. They waged war against the mermaids, losing for a while until they advanced in marine technology. Spellcasters joined these hunts with the humans, becoming quick enemies of mermaids. They would steal the mermaids and their scales for dark magic and potions. A few wed and had children with these mermaids, creating a rare race of sea witches. As their numbers dwindled further and further, competing with humans and other beings for the local fish and struggling to keep their land, their precious islands protected, they began to hide their mermaid traits in their human forms and relied heavily on community and secret calls in order to spot other mermaids. To this day, most mermaids stay in Sulani and Tartosa, where the oceans are. They aren't really big fans of having pools or small lakes if possible, preferring the natural state of the ocean. Even still, they became and have remained great friends of fairies, werewolves, and are rather wary of the vampire and spellcaster population. Now, with that being said, I actually do have quite a few rules, I guess if you want to call it, that I play with my mermaids. They're not super strict rules, and some of them do depend on, I guess, what time period I'm playing as. But these are just general things I keep in mind when I'm playing as mermaids or playing with mermaids. So first off, I don't like playing with mermaids who reside long-term in an area with no ocean, which basically means if I have a mermaid and they are a young adult or of adult age, I typically have them live in a world that has a playable ocean. In this case, I believe it's only Sulani and Tartosa. Even Tartosa's pushing it. I try to keep them all in Sulani. But, you know, in my modern saves, I will still have them go off to college and things like that. But of course, I'll just, I might just like put down a custom, what do they call it? Like custom dorm or something like that. And kind of maybe put a pool down or something like that. So they're not just hydrating in the shower or something. I don't know. I try to make like Monster High-esque worlds if I'm doing something like that, because in that case I feel like the mermaids would be kind of accounted for if they go to school in the world where occults are known and accepted, you know? Like, I feel like it's kind of rude to say that your campus is mermaid friendly and you don't even have like a lake nearby or a pool or something. I don't know. But if I'm playing an older save, I guess the one that's not taking place in modern day, then I would say that a lot of mermaids from Sulani would be rather restricted in higher education because they would go such a long time without the ocean and without like adequate, besides a shower or like a bathtub, they'd go so long without adequate access to water, I guess. Because at this point, it's not just about being hydrated, it's about connection with natural bodies of water. So I try not to keep my mermaids in an area for too long that doesn't have like at least a lake or something they can swim in. Like Henford on Bagley, there's like tiny little lakes they can swim in. And that's kind of okay, but they typically need to be near an ocean in my gameplay. Going back to the religions mod, I play the mermaids as treaders of the occult, or some of them may rarely be part of the cult of the cow plant if they're really big on like protecting the environment and by extension the sea. The way I play that though is, in my version, treaders of the occult is basically just an occult centric umbrella religion, and each, I almost said denomination, but each, I guess, occult will have their own version. So in my case, the mermaids worship sea gods. So there are multiple sea gods. They're not just one. There's quite a few different ones. I think there's 3 that I play with. A god of just the sea in general, a god of weather, because obviously the ocean and the sky are very connected. And they believe in like a separate mermatic god who, how do I explain this? Basically the god of what mermaids are, like these magical creatures. So 2 of them are very much natural based or weather based, and then one is specifically about being a mermaid and having like the ability to hunt and live underwater and like be themselves and have these abilities like that. Those are the main 3, but there are potentially smaller sea gods as well, but those are the main 3 I think of when I play as my mermaids, and if of course religion is coming into play, which I usually do if I'm playing like a mermatic village, or back when Fantasy-esque was doing a mermaid Amazon challenge, I kind of had my own personal mermaid Amazon challenge going on, and they had multiple sea goddesses, but I usually play sea god, so they're mixed gender. Speaking of societies, in my like non-modern gameplays, not necessarily medieval, just like if I'm not playing modern technology or anything like that, then they have a monarchical system, so there will always be a king and a queen, technically princes and princesses as well. But the monarchy isn't really the important part. The monarchs are really just like leaders that they go to when there's problems. But the real strength and the real way the society runs is through pods, which is where the MC Command Center larger groups section comes in. I allow my mermaids to be part of a large pod full of family and friends. Sometimes my pod is the whole village if I'm playing all of Sulani, and I'll make each residential lot, or most lots will be residential lots, and then I'll make them little villages, and each village, I have my MC Command Center set for groups to be up to 15 people. So those will be a pod, and then things like that. But if I'm playing just one large lot, I guess, then their pods will be smaller, mostly family or like chosen friends and stuff like that. So this is important because each person in a pod plays a critical role as to how things work. If I'm playing a modern gameplay, pods still exist, but they aren't fully just family. They're mostly like friends and some found family. But I think I'll go deeper into that in just a second. Basically, it's very much the village mindset that comes with the Sulani pack anyways. So everybody, even if they're not blood related, they are family, hence why the pods are so important. So for example, if a merchild, who is just a child of a mermaid, is orphaned, like both their parents are dead and there's no blood relatives, the pod will care for them even if they're not family. Usually the pod care for every child in that pod as if they're their own regardless. But that's why pods are so important. Pods can have feuds like between other pods. They can be as traumatic or not as traumatic as you desire. They can be mini wars if you want. They can be you know, they could be whatever you desire. It could even just be something as simple as someone didn't show up to the potluck. Like it can be anything, but when pods have feuds, it kind of affects the whole entire pod. So for my storytelling purposes, if two friends are like super close friends, but they're from two different pods and they're young, like they're children or they're teenagers, so they can't like make their own kind of pod or extend people into their pod quite yet because they're too young, then it can be a bit of a social problem. But it's usually not that deep, unless of course you're playing tribally, where each, again, I play so many different versions, but you can play where each pod or each village is its own little section, like its own little tribe. So there's so many different ways to play as mermaids, which is why I love playing as them. So I know I'm like giving so many examples because there's no one set way I play with them. It's just mostly loose rules that I integrate into whichever gameplay version I choose. So pod leaders usually, if you're playing a pod as just like a family, then they're usually like the parents or the grandparents or whatever the group needs. If you're playing it where like all of Sulani is one village and they're just like kind of split apart because islands, that's kind of where the monarchy would come into play. Or if you're playing more of like a village type, the elders, I guess, or whoever you decide can be the pod leaders. But there's usually two. There's usually like a main leader and then like a second in command. But the leaders can be whatever the group needs. So if you want your leader to be like not much of a fighter, they don't have to be a fighter. If you want your group to be someone who uses their power and ability and magic all the time, they can be that. So it can be whatever you desire. I don't have any strict rules about who or what the pod leader can be. Another rule I play as is mer children are not allowed to be raised in dry environments. So if I have a sim who is human or they have a child with a mermaid or something like that, it is actually seen as neglectful or abusive to raise mer children even before their mermaid traits kick in. If you're not playing with the mod and making your child sims into mermaids, it can be seen as neglectful or abusive to raise them in dry environments. So no Horse Ranch World, I forgot the name of that place, no Oasis Springs, no Strangerville. Like, it's even worlds that are really hot and not very rainy can be seen as like kind of pushing it as well. So like the what's the world where you go skiing at? I'm forgetting like names, it's crazy. But if it's not a world that at least has a lake, but once again it's really preferred as the ocean, but if it's not a world that at least has a swimmable lake nearby, by time their mermaid traits kick in, which I guess should be child if you're using the mod, or teens typically, it could be a problem with the rest of mermaid society if other mermaids find out, especially if you're human. They will probably try to take your child because your child should be having, it's more about just being hydrated. It's about having a connection with nature. And in this case, the aqua part of nature. Like you're depriving them of instincts and needs and connection with, you know, life, like bodies of water and aquatic plant life and fish and stuff like that. So mer children are not allowed to be raised in dry areas like that. Going back to pods, because I did not write my rules in order when I was writing them down. Pods, each pod / village, however you're playing it, must have at least one person who can speak with island elementals. I personally am a randomized traits type of girl, but if you want to add in traits, like if you have a reward trait mod where all the traits that come with the sims are a reward, or if you're using more traits and create a sim like I use, at least one person in your pod has to have the Child of the Islands trait, which will allow them to speak with island elementals, because each pod needs, I guess, a spiritualist, and basically the island elementals will be consulted during times of extreme duress. So like inter-pod or inter-village stress, you know, if you're playing as a war, or something like that, they would need to be consulted. Things like that. It's just nice to have someone who has a connection to the ancestors to kind of seek answers when, you know, during times of deep struggle. It doesn't necessarily have to be the wise old guy. It could be literally anyone. So that's how you decide to go about that is completely up to you. Again, there's so many different ways to play that, but it has to be one person at least. And if that person dies, that skill goes to another. How you want that to go, it could be via rebirth. It can just go to whatever child is born next. It can go to whoever the person was closest with. It can go to whoever, but it has to be within the pod or within the village, however you're playing it. Speaking of pods, gender roles don't matter. There are actually no strict gender expectations in mermaid society, unlike aliens. People can decide whether or not they want to be, I don't know, seen as their the gender they were born as or the sex they were born as. They could be trans, they could be non-binary. Like it doesn't really matter because gender roles explicitly don't matter. What matters most is your role within the pod. So the roles within the pod that I play as are protectors, which are basically people that defend the pod. They can be physical protectors. They could be like, what's the word? Like breadwinners, like the person making the most money or something like that. Hunters. So if you're playing a non-modern save and you're having them live off the land, of course they're going to need to, you know, they're going to be eating fish. Let's be real. Fish and most likely chickens. I'm not sure how you're going to get the pork thing unless you have that mod that allows you to have free roaming pigs. But hunters are very important if you're playing that type of way. Caretakers are usually the ones taking care of the young infants through toddlers, especially if you're playing non-modern gameplay. So, you know, they're there taking care of the kids, and they also typically do the gardening and stuff as well. There are scholars. The scholars come into play because they're typically the people keeping track of history and what's going on. And if you're using the expanded Mermaids mod, there's actually a mermaidic book that you can use to gain mermaidic XP because that mod has like a skill tree system. So the scholars are the ones who like study these books and study these tomes and everything like that, so that the you know the pod can remain informed, you know, and intelligent. Next up is spiritualists, who I kind of explained earlier is basically the person who has the connection with the ancestors, aka the island elementals, who are consulted during times of need. If you watch Fantasy-esque Mermaid Amazon Challenge, but also kind of her Vampire Amazon Challenge, this role, it wasn't called Spiritualist, but basically this person also kind of read the stars or read the clouds or whatever and used the pop-ups to kind of tell the future of the child, like with I don't even know how to explain this, but basically they could see the stars, maybe read the ocean or something like that. And the cloud pop-ups that come when you're watching when your Sims are watching the sky were used as omens or glimpses of the future and what things may be like. So that's another way I like to play my Spiritualists as well. It's just really fun. And of course there's pups. Pups are anyone between infancy through modern day teenhood, because you're still a child. But if you're playing not a modern save, then it's just infant through child, because teens can do quite a lot actually. But yeah, that's why gender doesn't really matter. So my pod roles depend mostly on personality. That's how I like to do it. So someone who's like feisty and likes adventure and likes to fight will most likely be the protector. But certain villages or certain ways I like to play occasionally, maybe the village train certain children and teenagers for a role, like kind of get them started in a direction they want them to go. Or again, I'm very inspired by Fantasy-esque for these mermaids, if you can tell, but Fantasy-esque, the roles are hers is Amazon, so it's the eldest daughter, but it could just be via bloodline. You could just have a bloodline of protectors or a bloodline of caretakers, something like that. It depends, but I like to do mine based on personality because I think it's fun. It adds like expectations. Like if you're protector, if you have two protector parents, but you come out like a caretaker, you know, would they be proud? Would they be happy about it? That's kind of like how I like to play. Also, polyamory is common, so a lot of pups within a group will kind of see all of the protectors, or not the protectors, but all the adults as kind of like their parent in one way, shape, or form. But being polyamorous, having multiple partners, it's not frowned upon. It's rather common actually, because again, they travel in pods. So outside of modern gameplay, I guess, even then I still play pretty pod-like in my modern gameplays, but strict nuclear family roles do not matter in mermaid society the way I play it, which means things like gender and stuff also really don't matter. Even when it comes to like having children, you know, I have them have a child with whoever they love, but if I have polyamory unlocked for the adults of of the pod, and my woohoo is set to potentially make children no matter what, then, you know, whoever gets pregnant, whoever the father is and stuff, don't typically matter to me anyways, because one, the game will stop me from doing anything accidental if they're like actually cousins or half siblings or something, but I typically have them find mates and stuff from outside the pod. And last but not least, let's go back to sea witches. So this is why I said my sea witches are a little different from the way the mod is. In the mod, the sea witches, I'm not gonna spoil the mod because I think everybody should play it for themselves because it's actually so fun. But you have to dive a bunch of times to potentially get a book. And as you read the book and sing a song in the dead of night during the moon or something like that, you will have access to sea witch abilities that come with that mod, which is a whole nother list of abilities. Like I said, this creator added a whole new skill tree, so 2 new skill trees essentially. So there's so much to do in this thing. But I play my sea witches. Yes, I use that as well because I like the spells that come along with it, but what I'll do is I'll play sea witches like via the mod, but they'll also be a hybrid. They'll also be mixed with spellcasters, so they'll have access to making potions and the spells that come with spellcasters from Realm of Magic, making them a completely different race from mermaids. for my gameplay. They are terrifying because they're so powerful, because they have their mermaid abilities, the like Poseidon abilities, that's the name of the book that comes with the mod for the sea witches, and plus the spellcaster ability. So that's three different abilities to pull from. They can be terrifying. They are one of the strongest forms of hybrid in my gameplay, which is why they're extremely rare. And again, a lot of mermaids are super wary with spellcasters, so they won't typically get with spellcasters to begin with. So the fact that sea witches even exist in that way is already somewhat taboo. Even in my modern gameplay, it's kind of like is that like a nice thing? But it is a thing where a lot of different occults don't really like the hybrid version of their occults. So the sea witches can face quite a bit of discrimination from other mermaids because they have dark magic in their blood, and because a lot of other occults don't like witches in general, despite the fact that these are sea witches, they might face certain discriminations as well. If I'm playing a gameplay where like all occults are accepted, it don't matter, you know, my Monster High universe or whatever, then it won't matter. But in most cases, sea witches will typically be given the side eye. They will probably have some social issues within the pod, within other mermaid society, and might face some weird looks from other occults as well. As for my vampires mods, there are quite a few that I really enjoy and I feel bring vampires to life. Pun not intended, I guess. It gives them a lot more depth and emotion, I think. So, and more ways to play them. So one of my favorite ones is the More Drinks for Vampires by, I want to say Zero Sims, but basically with this mod, your vampires can order or make their own drinks, like bloody drinks. They can drink it out of like a wine glass. You can have it say blood or plasma. I just say the word blood. But it gives them something to order at a bar, and they can just do it on their own, and it looks really nice and regal, so you don't just have to walk around with plasma packs. If you know, if you're playing like a noble or rich vampire household, you're not just walking around eating plasma fruit or drinking out of like the plasma Capri Sun looking packs if you're going for a different vibe. So I love it. Next up, I think it's also by Zero, is the Vampires Can Kill mod. This mod, very much in the title, it offers another what is it called? When you click on your vampire to drink, and you know, a deep drink would compel the Sims to like pass out, there'll be an option where it's like compel drink to death, you know, large or small, and it's just a deadly drink. It's good for storytelling purposes, or if you have a sim or a vampire sim that like doesn't really care about human life, you can really showcase that by having them just, every time they drink plasma from a human, it's just drink to death, and then it creates a custom ghost or custom death called Death by Vampire, which I think is also fun if you play with ghosts. So it's really fun. And I think there's also, you can restore life force, you can compel other vampires to do other things. It has like a cattle system, so for those of you who do darker gameplays who want I guess humans around to just drink from without having to make a whole nother lot or make a separate group, this mod also lets you have like cattle, which is called in the mod, and then they have levels of their own, and your vampires can control and drink from them and things like that, and they can cook and clean around the house and things like that as well. They act essentially like butlers with no needs. That's essentially how they work, with a bit more, you know, a few more caveats. So it's really good for storytelling, especially if you're playing like a royal or a rich vampire. It adds a lot to what you can do. Next up are two recipe-based mods I use. One is Little Bobub. This creator has a few occult themed goods. They make a lot of good food. So if you are looking for recommendations for like custom food items or things like that, they have tons, especially if you're using medieval stuff. But they have a section of their granny's cookbook called Occult, and it's growing, don't get me wrong, and there's some older ones too, but they have some extra plasma options there that are just fun for vampires to eat as well, and some like vampire themed cakes and things like that for your younger vampire kids who can still eat food, you know. And if that's a bit too much work for you, there is another mod called the Plasma Fruit Recipe. So this creator turns every single recipe that is in The Sims 4, and it is constantly updated with each new pack. So as more recipes are added to the base game without mods, they just make a plasma version of it. You can, I think there's 2 versions. I don't really use this one as much, but I did way back in the day. But it has plasma fruit recipes. Every single recipe is plasma based or blood based, and you can choose like which color you want. I guess if you want it purple for plasma, red for blood, it'll be like plasma grilled cheese or something like that. So if that's a lot easier for you to feed your vampires, or if you have like vegan vampires who you don't want to go out drinking from humans or something like that, that is, you know, it's perfectly fine to use this mod. But keep in mind that the food items will be the exact color. It will be colored a specific way. So yes, there's a giant red turkey. It's really fun, but it depends on what aesthetic you're going for. It works really well with the soups, I think, in my opinion, best. Like the soups and fruit bowls, I feel like it works best with that. Next up, it's not a mandatory mod, but it's something I like, which is the No Vampire Sickness mod. I don't use this mod anymore because I use custom sicknesses now. I use Healthcare Redux and Private Practice. But if you're someone who's not using those mods, this one works great for EA sicknesses. And basically it stops your vampires from getting sick because, I mean, they're vampires, they're cold-blooded, they have no blood. They probably wouldn't really be prone to viral illnesses in that way. It just stops them from getting sick, because I did not like my vampires being covered in swirls and stuff like that. I feel like they wouldn't get sick, right? They're undead, they sleep in coffins, they can't die by normal means, so why would they get sick? Why would they catch the sim flu, you know? But keep in mind, if you are like me and use custom illnesses or custom health systems like Healthcare Redux or Private Practice mod or anything else, this mod will not stop those illnesses from happening. But when that happens, in my case, I just cancel it out. Or actually, I just go in and manually make my vampire sims unable to get sick in general, actually. Another one that's also very aesthetic is the Little Miss Sam's No Cold Breath for Vampires mod. Again, they're cold-blooded, they have no blood, whatever you want to call it. I don't feel like they would have cold breath because they have no warmth, in my opinion. So it's again, very nitpicky, but if you have a vampire that's out in the cold or like a cold night, I feel like we shouldn't see their breath, right? The same way we don't see their reflection in the mirrors, I feel like we shouldn't see their breath in front of them on cold days. Now, I do have 2 like Vampire Slayer mods. One I don't really use as much often, and one I do. So the first one is A Reason to Slay. I don't use A Reason to Slay as often anymore. I do think it's still really good to use, specifically for their Vampire Hunting Ground lot challenge, which basically increases the likelihood of a vampire home invasion and stuff like that. So even vampires who should have garlic immunity, they will try to get into your house. It makes it a lot more difficult to keep vampires out. So if you're doing a story mode of like a vampire running around town or around a village or something like that, instead of trying to do it manually yourself, this lot trait is perfect. It's called Vampire Hunting Ground, which is one of the only reasons I actually still use this mod, the Slayer mod. This one also, vampire NPCs will feed themselves, so they will autonomously ask for a drink or drink deeply or compel for a drink. So it's not just the home invasion vampires that will drink from your sims. It'll be if you have a sim at a party or at a festival at night and the vampire's there and they're thirsty, they will just go for it, right? And then it will depend on their the friendship status with the sim who's being attacked, potentially attacked, or if they're like evil or something. So if you have a vampire and they're like a friend that's not part of the household or something, and because they're friends or they're close with whatever sim you're playing as, they might autonomously ask if they can drink from you. But if they're just evil or they don't care, they will just bite, and they don't act in public. Like, they don't attack in bars or nightclubs, if I imagine it. It was quite literally, my sims were mostly just being attacked on the sidewalk or like axed in the privacy of their home, but it was never public, which I think works really well as well. It increases dangerous walk-bys, and it had some fixes for like duels and vampire slaying, and has a vampire hunter part-time job or group or something like that. I can't remember, but your teenagers can join it too. And it makes vampire curse creation a bit more difficult, and I think they have an update since the Faeries have come around, because vampires can cure vampirism. There we go. But I think it makes it more difficult for fairies to cure vampiricism. So I think it depends on like how strong that vampire is. It shouldn't be like as equal, right? So like I said, I still use this mod, or I'll put it in and out depending on what's going on in the story, but it's not something I have in just all the time. But one of my favorite things that came with this mod as well was risky bites, which means if your vampire or another vampire bit someone and they didn't like die, even if they don't have that not traits, but that ability, the vampire ability to turn a sim into a vampire, there's a chance where it could actually happen accidentally. So you can choose how high or low you want that risk to be. There's compatibility with Royalty and Legacy is still being updated. It's a great mod, so it just depends on what you want in the game. But if you're playing like a vampire town or like, I don't know, in your Twilight era or something like that, this is a fantastic mod, especially if you want your vampires to act a certain way but you don't want to control them, because EA vampires are still pretty stagnant just on their own. The one I do use the most actually is called the Vampire Slayer mod. Basically, it allows human sims, or well, any sim actually, to have a trait called Vampire Slayer trait. It gives your sim better stamina, more strength. They learn vampire lore and fitness higher. They have a sense of when a vampire is nearby, and it gives a lot of different ways to slay a vampire. I'm not a fan of the EA slaying, where it's just like a regular fight and then the winner just like pours a drink that they made on the bar over their head and then they're cured, or they die or something like that. I'm not a fan of that personally. I feel like if you're gonna slay the vampire, just slay him. I feel like there should be a difference between vampire curing and vampire slaying. So I take the EA thing where they, I guess that drink kind of forces them to become human again, as vampire curing, even if it's like a forced curing. And this mod I use specifically for slaying. This works perfectly well alongside the one I just previously mentioned, actually. They work really well together. So you don't have to choose either or like I am. I just haven't been playing with vampires as much, so I haven't found a need for both at the moment. But the chances of me having both in my game at the same time are high. These vampire slayers can kill with holy water, kill with wooden stake, electrical impulse. You can fight using a dagger, like really put your physical capabilities on the line. You have to like prepare holy water, you have to cut wooden stake at the woodworking table. Like, you actually have to put in work as a vampire slayer to slay with this mod, which is why it's so fun. Like, you can purchase weapons, you have to make the taser, you have to buy the dagger, and the sim themselves can also lose and they'll just like die. So well, there's a chance that they could die during the fight, so it puts a lot of weight on those battles, which is what I really like. There's mentoring, vampire slayer experiences, like everything like that. And this creator has a lot of occult mods that work really well with this. They have a Dracula aspiration mod, which is like the original vampire mod. I don't really use that one, but it's an aspiration. And I will link it down below as well because it's great to use. Now, because this does require an extra trait, and I know base game has 3, I'll link this one down below as well, but it's not technically part of my Occult Mods experience. But for in this case, because I am talking about a personality trait being taken up, I use the More Traits to Create a Sim mod, which gives my Sims 5 traits instead of 3. So there's always like an extra slot available. Or if you use that mod that allows traits to also be rewards traits, then you can just go crazy. This mod also includes 2 extra aspirations, which are really cute. The first one is, I think it's called Forbidden Lover, where like if you have a hunter who is in love with a vampire and you want to make them human again, or you can change your hunter into a vampire. Like, it's really fun. So, and there's of course like a vampire hunter aspiration itself. So there's Chosen Love and there's Forbidden Love. Your hunters can just go hunting. They can mark a new hunter with powers. There's a crossbow, like a bow and a crossbow. There's just all types of stuff. There's a trait for vampires called the Original, where the vampire is immune to vampirism, so you can't even cure them. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot you can do. It's really fun and in-depth, especially if you want like little battles and you want there to be stakes for your Sims and the other Sims, because your hunter can still die. Keep that in mind. So, and last but not least is another one of my favorites. It's very simple, but it's fun for me. Is the Make Plasma Packs from Plasma Fruits mod. If you have Sims for vampires, you know that for your vegetarian or your good vampires, they do not like to drink from humans. And without certain mods, I think the Vampires Can Kill mod I mentioned earlier allows you to drink from cattle if you want to. But besides that, the only other way for your Vampire Sims base game to be able to drink is to get that one plasma drink that comes with the game at the bar, if you don't have the More Drinks for Vampires mod, or you eat plasma fruit, or you can get some fish and then use the blood from the fish or plasma from the fish to make plasma packs, which are essentially like Capri Suns for vampires. I don't like that for my vampires that were vegetarian or maybe animal lovers, they were kind of forced to use fish. Or if they were like child of the ocean, I feel like that really wouldn't. I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of being, you know, not wanting to hurt any living being to feed yourself. So I don't know why EA didn't make it available for plasma fruit, like from the trees that they put into the game, to be made into plasma packs. Luckily, dear little Miss Sam has done it for us. It is updated, pretty much every single monster updated, but yeah, you don't have to worry about using frogs and fish to make plasma packs. You can leave them alone, just have a bunch of plasma trees outside and make your Sims plasma packs out of the fruit, and it has the same level of satiation as the regular plasma packs do. But I just really like this option because I feel like it makes sense. You do need Vampire Lore level 4, the same way you do for regular plasma packs, so. And it fills up the hunger bar either the same amount or a bit more. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit more, but yeah, it's either way, it works really well and is very efficient. No one truly knows where the first vampire came from. Some believe it to be a human or a witch who stumbled upon dark magic. Others believe it to be a curse bestowed on a human who dared to think themselves a god in search of immortality. Either way, they came into existence and wreaked havoc on the human world. Most vampires worked alone. They stayed individual, hunting on their own and infiltrating high society. Over time, they began spreading and forming small families of pure bloodlines called clans, or groups of non-blood related vampires called covens. For centuries, many vampires were accidentally turned during attacks, causing a rise of feral fledglings that would decimate farms and humans. This bloodshed led to the creation of human vampire hunters. They created guilds themselves and rose in popularity around the medieval era. They waged war against the vampires, even working alongside some werewolves and witches. Vampires, for their immortality, struggled to survive with these circumstances. The stronger and pure bloodlines were easily hid amongst high society, but those who were poor and weak struggled to control their instincts on their own. The vampires waged war with werewolves over resources, were at war with witches who wanted their blood and their fangs and their power. They attacked mermaids and fairies and became one of the most hated occults besides witches. As time moved on, vampires still remained focused mostly on their individual nature or their small covens or clans, but the few ancient pureblood families that still existed were treated like royalty. Now, most vampires lead regular lives. They don't really have a formal government or a formal group, but they will come together during times of need. Of course, there are a few rules I play with vampires to kind of keep them in check. So, first and foremost, random turnings are frowned upon. It is very important for vampires who are turning humans or other cults into a vampire to take care of their fledglings. Their fledglings are to be treated as family. Most vampires treat their fledglings as children, though there are circumstances where one might turn their lover. And, you know, while that is their fledgling, they treat them the same way they would a partner. So because this connection between sire and fledgling, regardless of what the family unit may look like, it is really important, because when fledglings are kind of left on their own, they become extremely feral and bloodthirsty. They have no guidance, and those are the vampires who are most likely to randomly attack humans, cattle, farm animals, anything. Like they're the ones that mostly were being hunted by and causing a problem in the medieval era, because of course they were hunting and killing any human they could come across. They were decimating farms, killing cattle, llamas, chickens. Like, if it had blood, they were decimating it. That's a big reason they were at war with the werewolves when it came to werewolves needing a safe place to hunt, meat, and eat, and the vampires needing a safe place to, you know, try not to attack humans and going after the local game. And it's best for vampire fledglings to stay with their sires. Now, are all sires good sires? Not necessarily. You can absolutely be a fledgling to a bad sire, but as long as it's not like a vampire walking around the streets turning people at mass and just letting feral vampires run free and die off and cause all this chaos and havoc, most of vampire society, because they are so individualistic, will turn a blind eye. Not a good thing, but that's very much how they operate. Now, when a fledgling is turned, they have to stay in the same household as their sire until they rank up to whatever that second rank is that I can't remember off the top of my head, and I didn't pull up an image. But again, for the same reason, they have to be taught how to do certain things on their own. They have to have a certain level of strength before they're allowed to go off in the world. They don't necessarily have to be part of the same coven or the same clan, though, you know, typically they would be, and most think they should be. But as long as they're not a fledgling, as long as they're not completely helpless, they can leave. So sires who are not very good sires will try to keep, you know, some fledglings as weak as possible. But if other vampires get word of this, they will step in and get that fledgling to a safe space, even though not being around the person who sired them is mentally and physically pretty painful. It is very frowned upon to turn human teenagers. Wait till they're young adults. We don't do that around these parts. Even teenage vampires, normally the teenage vampires, whether they're turned as teenagers, which again is frowned upon, or is a case of someone from a bloodline of vampires who aged into their vampirism as a teenager. They should be too weak to turn a human anyway, so if the human teenager is turned, it's most likely going to be someone older and is very much seen as like creepy. It's not really a good thing, especially because, like I just said, fledglings and kind of being forced to be around your sire is an important part of fledgling growth. So they do consider it like a type of like a grooming type of situation if a vampire, actually a young adult or an adult vampire, turns a teenager. Though there have been cases of like an adult, you know, not wanting a teenager to die and then turning that teenager and then them living as parents and child for all eternity, but it gets old pretty quick. It's still somewhat frowned upon. You know, at least wait till they're a young adult or in their late teens or something like that, but it's yeah, most vampires are not fans of that. In the beginning, if you are having a fledgling hunt humans or whatever else, they always have a stronger vampire around. If they're just like making plasma packs and eating plasma fruit, no one like cares. But if they're actually going out, especially if they're going out hunting humans or anything that could fight back and potentially hurt the fledgling, because they will be at their weakest at this point, they have to do so with a stronger vampire, preferably their sire or someone from their from their coven or their clan. They cannot go out and do it by themselves. It really increases the chances of them accidentally killing someone. If they're not trying to kill, it increases the chances of them being attacked. If there are hunters around, it increases the chances of them going feral. Like, it's just someone more experienced has to be around to reel them in and keep them safe. Now, while vampires do not have any formal structure, really, they do have ancient bloodlines of pureblood vampires, which is where the bloodlines mod come in, or ancient vampires. I call them purebloods. They are kind of treated more like royalty or celebrities, but they don't necessarily they have social power, but not necessarily political power, at least not inherently. What vampires really have is a council of the strongest elders. So the people who have been alive for longer than most other vampires, who have high-ranking vampire abilities, who are known to be wise and fair, hopefully. The council isn't always good, but the council is made up of the strongest physically, and council members are decided by combat. It doesn't necessarily have to be to the death, but historically it has been, you know, you can take my chair if you kill me type of situation. Now, for vampires, unlike a lot of my other occults, they actually do have a bit more of strict concepts of gender and sexuality. If you're playing, I guess, historical gameplay, modern vampires follow modern rules where gender and sexuality can be a bit more fluid. But for older vampires, it's especially for those who are attempting to make pure blood vampire bloodlines, they would like it to be more heteronormative. Now, they don't care if you have your fun with people of different genders or things like that and sexualities, but if you're going to get married and that has a different word. If you're going to get married and birth children, they want you to do so with the opposite gender, or the opposite sex, I should say. So they're a lot more strict in the pureblood vampires for like clan purposes than sirehood is. For sirehood, if two guys are together and they want to like form a coven themselves of, you know, friends or family members or maybe adopted children and then turn them later on or something like that, that's seen as a bit different, but this is not being treated with as much weight as a clan. So if you want to make blood-related pureblood vampires, they really want you to stick to I guess more of a nuclear family. You can have whatever side piece you want, but that's pretty much the only time they care too much about gender and sexuality when it comes to like birthing vampires. Speaking of birthing vampires, I actually use MC Command Center to, well, not MC Command Center, I use my either Wonderful Whims or MC Command Center to not completely turn off vampire fertility, but it is dramatically lowered. So bloodline, pureblood vampire clans don't just have like a sprawl of children out and about. They struggle to have children. Like they struggle to carry and birth children because the process is a little different when the only thing you feed on is blood, you know? So just keep that in mind as well. You don't have to do it like that. I just do it like that. Vampires worship who is known as the Blood Goddess, which means that they are technically under the treaders of the occult religion with the Rambunctious Religions mod. The Blood Goddess isn't super strict. All she requires is, well, back in the day, it's believed that this, for those who think, I guess, that vampires were cursed by a god, it is believed that the Blood Goddess, who would have been a dark goddess or is a dark goddess, would have seen these beings and felt some sort of connection for the bloodshed she caused. So some people think that, you know, older sacrifices and stuff like that were being done by vampires was for the Blood Goddess, and that the Blood Goddess, all she asks is that they consume blood, worship her, create, you know, have a connection with, how do I say this? If Plantsims and Faeries have a connection with life force through the form of nature, vampires have a connection with the life force in terms of the thing that pumps through everybody's body being blood. So they kind of see it as stealing life, even if they're not doing the whole steal life force ability that a lot of vampires have. It's kind of considered the same thing for those who worship the Blood Goddess, that the Blood Goddess is offering them a life they would have never been able to achieve had they been mere mortals, or especially if they had been humans. So just keep that in mind. Not all vampires are super strict about the Blood Goddess. How strict I want them to be depends on really how I'm playing at that moment. If I'm just playing regular vampires, they're pretty chill about it. But if I'm playing something medieval, or I'm following like a dynasty, I guess, of a pureblood vampire clan, they might be a bit more strict about their worship of the Blood Goddess. Vampires hate werewolf blood, obviously. They feel okay about human blood. They can decide whether or not it was a tasty treat or not, but they love fairy and witch blood because the magic in their blood is just a little, it's just a little addicting for a vampire. So fairies, really watch out for them. Spellcasters mostly can hold their own against a vampire, but I guess it depends on how strong the vampire or how strong the spellcaster themselves are. And mermaids, they feel pretty neutral about, the same as humans. Some vampires like are rude to mermaids. If they come across them and drink from them, they'll call their blood fishy, which is degrading to the mermaids. But honestly, mermaids and vampires don't really cross paths that often. Mermaids still stick closer to sunny, beachy areas like Sulani and Tartosa, which is way too sunny and too hot for an average vampire. So they never really cross paths. So it's an acquired taste and a delicacy. It's rare. And also, going into the living situation, my vampires stay in darker and shadier worlds that have longer nights. So they do not stay in the beach worlds. They do not stay in the worlds that have super high humidity and too much sun. So no Sulani, no Tartosa, no Oasis Springs, if possible, right? They'll stick to San Myshuno. They're pretty much free to go to any world, really, but the ones that are like that are just known for just being dry and sunny, like in that way, are kind of off limits. As for the vampire world that comes with The Sims 4 vampires, there's literally, what, 4 lots? 3, I think, actually. They don't have to be stuck in that world. I know some people like their vampires to be stuck in that world. I don't like that they're stuck there because I want them to be spread about. So it really depends on how you want to play it. If you follow my Ultimate Decades challenge, a lot of my vampires live in what's known as the Lawless Lands, which is a world in between some of the most powerful kingdoms where the king's rules from either kingdom do not reach those lands, and it's full of refugee occults, including vampires. But that also means when it comes to vampiric attacks, there's no official king or knight to protect them. They take the protection into their own hands. So there's pros and cons to these things. And again, vampires are they can be played in a variety of different ways. If anybody watches Fantasy-esque, she has a super amazing Vampire Amazon challenge, which is the Amazon challenge, but with vampires. And the rules and everything she comes up with to make them interesting and, you know, to make the challenge fun is really fun. There's people on Instagram who have like vampire-centric storylines and things like that. So the only mod I really use for my plant sims is the expanded Plantsims mod, which is by the same creator as the expanded Mermaids, Faeries vs. Witches, and the Lichen mod that I talked about earlier. But basically this mod is quite literally the only way I play with plant sims, or the only reason I would have to play with plant sims. It works really well with the Faeries vs. Witches mod, specifically the Fairies section. But basically it introduces a whole power system. There's like an invisible skill tree situation going on. And of course it has a little bit of its own lore that I've integrated with my lore, and a lot of creative sim items and a lot of gameplay. With this mod, you can not only make plant sims, but you can make so many different types of plant sims with so many different abilities. You can make a bizarre plant sim, which I'll get to in just a second actually. But you can also make satyrs or satyrs, I don't know how to pronounce them, but the beings with the goat legs who are known for playing the pan flutes, those guys. And of course you can make mice noise, which are big mushroom people. You can make, I don't know what they're called, the tree people. You can make like walking trees. There's like so many different beings that are not just plant sims that you would be normally limited to with the game itself. And of course, this is pretty much the only way you can play as a plant sim and then give them their own makeover, because with the Sims 4 plant sims that exist, once your sim is a plant sim, they're like stuck with that whack hair color, that whack hairstyle. It's very limited with what you can do with the EA plant sim. They don't have like powers, they don't really do much, to be fair. They're my least favorite plant sim, which made me sad because I played with plant sims and fairies all the time in The Sims 3. In fact, plant sims were like one of my favorite occults to play with in The Sims 3, so the fact that it was so lacking in The Sims 4 was very upsetting to me. Now, lore-wise, there is quite a bit of integration between my aliens and this one. So for starters, as I've said in my aliens video, the planet of Sixum it's a planet. It's filled with different races, different beings, different cultures, and of course different religions. And because it is its own separate planet, that means it does have its own ecosystem. And one of the gods of Sixum is essentially Sixum's own Mother Nature, a being who is attuned to the nature of Sixum and the plants and animals that live there. Now, as we know from my alien lore video, Sixum has a lot of problems, and one of the biggest things that was their downfall for a very long time is kind of the lack of resources, as well as the slow destruction of their planet, which of course would affect Mother Nature herself, or Sixum's Mother Nature. Now, when one of the Sixum refugees came to Earth, they brought with them a seed. And with this seed, it was planted in Strangerville and became what we know of as, in the Strangerville pack, as the mother plant. The mother plant is not of Earth, therefore it is not technically part of Earth's Mother Nature's domain. It is its own separate person, or own separate being, I should say, with its own abilities and its own reach. Luckily, it hasn't really reached much outside of Strangerville, but it has spread through the Plantsims. When the mother plant grew and started sprouting plants and spores across Strangerville, the few Plantsims that actually lived there thought that these were just plants that desperately needed help. They assumed that these were plants that were corrupted by magical experiments of witches, or, you know, perhaps human science had done something to mess it up. So they got closer and closer to these plants in an attempt to heal them, an attempt to understand it. They were exposed to its spores and ate its fruit. And of course, that led to them being corrupted. The mother plant actually is able to corrupt them on a DNA level. And over time, they just kind of became what is known as bizarre Plantsims or corrupted Plantsims, because their complete connection with Mother Nature of the earth they live on has been disrupted, and their mind and soul has now been bonded with the mother. Now, of course, the mother is very controlling. She's in the mind and everything like that, but that's because that is very Sixami nature. We've talked about in the Alien Lore video that while on Earth, it is rather rude to use someone's mind or like speak through telekinesis or read their emotions and, you know, do all these things without talking or without explicit consent is very, very frowned upon and seen as a violation of like rights, or just a violation of like personal boundaries. But on Sixam, that's not the case. That's just how they interact. It's how they understand each other. It's part of who they are. It's not even cultural. It's just, it's Sixam. It's almost like human nature, but for Sixam aliens. Mother Nature operates very much the same, or the bizarre mother acts the same. The Mother Nature of Earth is very much about freedom, which we've discussed in the Fairy Lore video and the Mermaid Lore a little bit as well. With the mod, the bizarre plant sims act very much like every other plant sim, but the two biggest differences are, one, they can corrupt and expose other plant sims to the mother spores to grow her, not her army, but to give the mother more children. The mother considers all of those under her control to be her children. So these plant sims can corrupt other plant sims via spores that they just like spray out of their hands, because remember, their DNA itself has been corrupted. With the humans and non-plant sims, it's their mind that's being controlled. With plant sims, once the bizarre mother has gotten a hold of them, that's their whole being, right? The point of being a plant sim is to have one of the closest and most explicit relationships with Mother Nature. With the mod, the plant sims can actually summon and speak to and pray to Mother Nature herself. I mean, the fairies pray to her as well, but she doesn't just like show up, you know, not like she does with the plant sims. So they lose their connection with the sun as well. They have to, they photosynthesize using the moon. The sun actually burns them. Very much like the plants in Strangerville. I think they're mostly awake at night rather than during the day. So again, it very much changes them. You have way more control over them. It doesn't really operate the same way possession does. With the Strangerville pack, they can still move around and take care of business, whatever you want them to do. And actually, if you hate the Strangerville walk, like if it creeps you out or they're just moving too slow, the mod actually offers the ability to turn it off if you need to be. But like I said before, they live very similar to fairies. So if you want to know like how they live, very similar to fairies, very communal, no set gender or sexual boundaries or anything like that. I will say, for plant sims, most of the time they don't, unless they get with a being that has to reproduce sexually, they typically reproduce via the plant sim pods. So with this mod, you do get the ability to plant a little pod that will flower a plant sim baby, which is probably the only way in the game, using the mod, I guess, that you can have a plant sim that's a plant sim from infancy up. I don't think you can like give birth to a pure plant sim even with the mod. I think you can cheat it if you want to. You can just cheat it. But yeah, again, very, very quick lore. Nothing much to write home about in terms of the plant sims or anything like that. Now, last but not least, to end off the video, let's talk hybrids. Now, I talked about how I have the hybrid mod and what I use it for, but I never actually went and talked about the repercussions of various hybrids throughout the sections of this video when I was going over all the other occults. So let's just give a quick breakdown. Now, of course, when I mean hybrids, I mean the occult sims, like the sims that are actual creative sim occults that can be more than one occult, either through birth or I can make it that way manually. But let's just go down the list very quickly. These are, I guess, a little bit of rules / how I play with some of my hybrids. For starters, aliens are the occult race that are most accepting of hybrids. Even humans, as we know, they fear occults in general. They definitely fear hybrids. Aliens don't really care. They don't really have any qualms with most of these or any occults. If we really think about it, they don't care about hybrids or hybridism or anything like that. If they do have a fear, it'll probably be of like a general attack or something like that. Like an alien would be scared of a vampire, but they wouldn't like mistreat an alien vampire hybrid child or anything like that. You see what I'm saying? Now, I did talk about how mermaids fear sea witches because they are extremely powerful. They are typically, with the expanded mermaids mod, they don't have to be a hybrid, but I did say that when I have sea witches, they are specifically spellcaster mermaid hybrids. Mermaids do and will separate themselves from a sea witch. They will give a sea witch the Naruto treatment, like you can be around, but I don't really want to be involved with you. They kind of think of them as being explicitly evil, like from birth, simply because of the fact that they have witch blood. Vampire spellcaster hybrids are extremely rare just because not vampire spellcaster, good lord. Vampire mermaid hybrids are extremely rare, and mostly that's because vampires and mermaids are never really in the same place long enough to mate, if that was a thing. Like I said, vampires typically try to stick in like darker places or in cities and stuff like that, and mermaids try to stick near oceans. Unless there's a super powerful vampire who is immune to sun, there's no reason or no way they would want to even step foot in Sulani or Tartosa, which is where most of my mermaids are. So we never really see that, but also it would be very difficult to survive as a mermaid vampire hybrid, because how are you going to be immune to the sun but also need to like swim, unless you're only swimming at night? But then it's very limiting. It's very difficult to survive as that type, but then you also have to survive off of blood and or plasma. It's very difficult. So those are probably one of the rarest combinations of hybrids you will see. Now, the second most, well, actually the most feared hybrid besides sea witches. Sea witches are really only feared by mermaids, but they are, disturbingly powerful. The most feared hybrid actually is blood mages, which is the spellcaster vampire hybrid, which I've made very clear by now is my favorite hybrid to play as. You get all of the perks of being a vampire, including the vampire tree skills, as well as the spellcaster tree skills, the ability to make potions and everything like that. Matter of fact, if you're using the Faeries versus Witches mod, you could actually, if you didn't want to go through the whole like actual spellcaster like realm of magic spellcaster, you wanted them to be a witch instead, you could also do that. It might be a little difficult because the creator uses like the same bulb, but you might just have to like manually look at a tree here and there. But again, extremely powerful, very scary. Spellcasters don't really like when other spellcasters have kids with vampires, and vampires also don't like when they have kids with spellcasters. So blood mages are kind of like sea witches, but like it's very difficult to have people on their side, because even if they're a spellcaster, they look down on or fear vampires. And if they're not a vampire, or they're a vampire, they're looking down on the spellcaster, or looking down on that hybrid for having tainted blood. They look down on those who are mixed with werewolf, human, and spellcaster the most. They'll be confused by a vampire fairy, but they'll be like, okay, cool. Vampire mermaids just don't exist, but vampire spellcaster, they're going to assume that your parents want you to be a weapon. Like, that's probably, that's not the only reason, especially when it gets to modern day gameplay. It's like, okay, we fell in love because we fell in love, but they're going to assume that one or both of your parents did that to you on purpose. Like, it's even taboo in vampire culture to turn a spellcaster into a vampire, because they do not want those two things like being mixed like that. Like, some spellcasters or some vampires might like pity kill a hybrid if they come across them, because they want to stop a potential problem, or they just like, your immortal life is about to be difficult. So there's that. And like I just said, spellcasters and vampires are actually the least accepting of hybrids. It might be a little bit better in modern gameplay depending on the hybrid, but yeah, those two are the least accepting of hybrids, regardless of what they're mixed with. The only occult that is not able to be hybrided is probably Plantsims. So because they have a whole different way they work. I'm gonna be so honest, I don't like hybriding them. The few times I can, I really don't even think it's an option for, I'm not gonna lie to you. If they do get mixed with something, it'd probably be fairy. But if a Plantsim is hybrided, they probably just be considered a plant-based spellcaster or a fae. And I said in my Fairies versus Magic video, Fairies versus Magic, good lord, I said in my Fairies section of this video, or the Fairies video if you watched it separately, that the fae are the ones from the Sylvan Glade who have a closer connection with Mother Nature. So they wouldn't be considered an inner-screen fairy, but they would be considered a fae. But Plantsims they don't, in my opinion, have blood. So I feel like vampires wouldn't really drink from them much, even if they were like a plasma-based Plantsim, like a plasma tree-based Plantsim or something like that, which is, I don't really even think exists, I'm not gonna lie to you. But yeah, the Plantsims are usually left alone. They're closer to being considered like a fae, if anything, or really like a nymph, to be honest. And as for werewolves, in my opinion, I feel like werewolves have overpowering genes, so it would be very difficult to make a werewolf hybrid with anything. But if a werewolf is going to be a hybrid, it will most likely be a spellcaster werewolf hybrid, because those two work best together. But a lot of the times the werewolf genes, in my opinion, the way I play it, will overpower the spellcaster genes, and that child will either be a spellcaster with a dormant werewolf trait, or most likely a werewolf with little to no spellcaster magic. So there's that. But yeah, that is my occult lore video. Thank you all for watching this very long video, or watching all of the separate parts that came with it. I had a blast making this video. It's taken a while because I had to like actually put everything into words, and then of course, get the footage and everything. But I've had a really good time with this video, and I loved seeing everybody's comments about like how y'all play with your occults and some of the storylines y'all came up with for yourselves, or your favorite mods that maybe I didn't have, and things like that. So thanks again everyone. And of course, I'm still curious, which occult is your favorite to play with down below? Or if you really didn't like to play with occults, are you inspired to play with them now? I'm really curious, so let me know. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.